Chapter 41. Angie turned around immediately. In her eyes was a look of dread. Swoosh! She dashed towards the blood wolf and the man who were about 100 feet away from her position. But immediately she dashed out, the blood wolf had already raised its paws and was already slashing his claws down towards the body of the man. Even though Angie's speed was great, she could only cover about 40 feet in a second, which meant it would take her close to 3 seconds to cross 100 feet, but the blood wolf only needed a second for his attack to make contact with the man. Gustav, who happened to be closer to Angie's side, finally moved. "If he harms even one of them, it means I will fail the quest," Gustav said internally. "Sprint has been activated, -20 EP. Fuh!" Gustav sucked in air into his lungs as he slightly crouched. The entire scene had turned quiet again, and even with Angie's great speed, her movement was like a tortoise to Gustav right now. The claws of the blood wolf were slowly descending upon the man's head and were only a few inches away from making contact. The people in the neighborhood had their mouths opened in fright as their lips slowly circulated, proving that they were speaking but in slow motion. Swoosh! Gustav dashed towards the blood wolf. He passed Angie's side and arrived at the left side of the wolf, whose claws were already close to the neck of the man. Gustav was like a dwarf before the blood wolf. He threw a fierce jab towards its side. Bam! His fist made contact with the blood wolf's left rib area. The wolf whimpered in pain as the force lifted its entire body weight and launched it towards the building 3 meters to the side. Bang! It slammed heavily into the wall. Angie, who was running towards the blood wolf with as much speed as she could muster, only saw a silhouette streak past her, causing a small breeze to blow her hair upwards. Before she knew what was happening, a loud collision rang out, and the blood wolf was sent crashing into the building by the right side. She paused her movement in bewilderment, and stared at the person responsible for the incident. "Gustav!" she exclaimed with a shocked look while staring at him standing with his right arm outstretched. The man, who thought his death was certain, only saw Gustav appear in front of him like a phantom. His eyes were still widened in shock. Dash. "Oh my, isn't that our new neighbor?" Dash. "Yes, the one who attends Echelon Academy." Dash. "Wow, he is a mixed blood like Angie-chan." Dash. "But he seems stronger." The neighbors in the area were pleasantly surprised, not only at the revelation but at the fact that a single attack could blow the blood wolf away. The wolf's weight caused cracks across the wall. It stood up with a look of pain and anguish while staring at Gustav. "Sprint has been deactivated." Gustav deactivated sprint immediately he landed the hit. He didn't want to use up his energy completely since he might still need it for emergencies that may arise. He was just being cautious. "So it only got slightly injured even though the force of my punch was multiplied by 2, Gustav analyzed as he stared at the blood wolf. He felt his fist didn't penetrate deep enough. It was like there was an elastic force on the body of the blood wolf that absorbed a part of the force. The wolf dashed towards Gustav with a crazed look, slashing at him with rage. The neighbors were already started to have hope after seeing that another mixed blood was here, but Gustav's next action shocked them. He turned around and fled. Why is he running away? This was the question in everyone's mind. "Angie, stay here with everyone!" Gustav shouted out as he ran towards the end of the street with the wolf chasing after him. Angie couldn't even follow if she wanted to because not only was their speed fast, her stamina was also running out. Although she was worried about Gustav. Gustav's normal speed was faster than that of the blood wolf, so he was able to lead it past the street repeatedly. Gustav had already attracted its aggro, so it wasn't ready to give up chase yet. Also, sometimes Gustav would slow down so the blood wolf would think it was catching up, only for him to speed off again. This game of tag continued until they left the residential area and started traversing through the sparse forest behind. Swoosh! Swoosh! They dashed past several trees on the side. They got farther ahead to where the trees were starting to increase in number. After a few more seconds, Gustav suddenly stopped running. SHHSSSHH. Due to the sudden pause, Gustav slid a few inches forward, but he used that to turn around. The blood wolf also paused. In its mind, it wondered why its prey would suddenly stop running. It had a look of delight as it felt Gustav was probably tired of escaping and had decided to accept his death. The bloodwolf licked its lips as it moved slowly towards Gustav. All of a sudden it saw Gustav smiling at it, which baffled it. "Finally I can test this out. Thank you for being my first test subject," Gustav said with a wide grin plastered on his face. The bloodwolf couldn't understand what Gustav was saying, but its senses were telling it that this person in front was dangerous, but looking at Gustav from head to toe he could only see him as a weak-looking person until it heard Gustav mutter something. "Beast transformation bloodline." Right before its very eyes, the bloodwolf watched Gustav's body start expanding. "Partial mutated bull transformation has been activated." Gustav saw the notification appear in his line of sight as his muscles bugled, tearing open his sweater. His back became broader as his skin started turning red and two elongated horns grew out from the sides of his skull. It only took about 3 seconds before he transformed completely. He was now close to 2 meters in height. His sweater had expanded to the point that some parts had torn apart. Bulging muscles. Broad chest like that of a gorilla. 7 inches tusks. 2 horns. Gustav looked extremely intimidating right now, even though he wasn't as tall as the bloodwolf. The bloodwolf stared at him with a wary look, but at the same time, it wasn't ready to back down. "I've been wanting to couple this with my current strength and see how strong I would become. You're the perfect test subject," Gustav stated with a thick voice as he walked forward. Gustav knew that without the use of sprint, or any speed-related ability, it would be almost impossible to defeat the bloodwolf, so he decided to lead it to an empty place so he would finally be able to test out the beast transformation bloodline away from the eyes of others. Also, if he kept using sprint, his energy would be spent in 4 seconds. "Oh whoa!" The bloodwolf howled with unwillingness. The arrogant look in Gustav's eyes had angered it. Swoosh! Both of them dashed towards one another. Gustav could feel the increase of his strength and his speed, and he was enjoying it. He leaped 4 meters into the air and threw his fist out as he descended. The bloodwolf reacted by swinging its paws upwards to meet Gustav's blow. Gustav twisted his body sideways in midair, dodging the claws of the bloodwolf as his fist descended upon its head. Bam! The entire body of the bloodwolf slammed onto the ground. Gustav's fist was still resting on its head after descending, pinning its jaw to the ground. The bloodwolf grunted in pain as blood dripped down its face from the top of its head. It was feeling woozy after Gustav hit its head. Gustav pulled the head of the bloodwolf and lifted its body off the ground. "Ugh!" Gustav groaned as he carried the full body weight of the bloodwolf, which weighed more than 7,000 kilograms. Gustav flung its body towards a small tree on the right side. Bang! The body of the bloodwolf slammed into the tree, causing it to snap in half. Chapter 42. Bam! The weight of the bloodwolf caused the tree to come crashing down. Gustav purposely attacked its head first because he knew the elasticity of its skin would make it harder to defeat the mixed-breed creature quickly. Gustav dashed towards the bloodwolf again. The bloodwolf eyes were still woozy from the attacks, but it quickly stood up before Gustav's next attack could arrive. "Oh whoa!" It howled again as it dashed towards Gustav. Slash! Slash! The bloodwolf threw out several consecutive slashes towards Gustav. Gustav was able to dodge them with ease, but the wolf seemed to be protecting its head against Gustav so he wouldn't get the opportunity to attack it again. Gustav had to settle for attacking its body for the time being. Bam! Bam! Gustav slapped the right paw of the bloodwolf to his left, causing it to spread its arm apart. Its right chest was opened for a split second. Gustav wasted no time in sending out his palm toward its chest after creating an opening. Palm strike activated. Bam! Gustav's palms slammed into the chest of the bloodwolf, causing it to cave in as it was sent flying 3 meters backward. Bam! It slammed into another tree, causing the stem to blast into smithereens. Gustav only had 3 fingers due to the transformation, but it was enough to beat the crap out of the bloodwolf. Gustav leaped out again. His body traveled in midair towards the position of the bull as his right foot stomped out. Bam! A small cloud of dust was formed as the bloodwolf's head was stomped several inches into the ground, with blood flying out of its face in all directions. Gustav lifted his blood-soaked foot from the head of the wolf who had its face smashed in. Gustav stared at it for a while. That should have done it, he thought internally. Surprisingly, the blood wolf suddenly jumped up and ran in the opposite direction. Its speed was so quick that it shocked even Gustav. Isn't it supposed to be dead? Gustav wondered as he chased from behind. The bloodwolf's face that was bloody initially started to go back to normal as the blood smeared all over, retracted back into the injuries. It was healing up at a visible rate. Its left chest area that caved in due to Gustav's palm strike had regained its initial appearance. Gustav was catching up with it, but he had noticed that the blood wolf was regenerating. It can regenerate? He was surprised since he had no information whatsoever on mixed breeds. I can't let it get away. What if it affects my quest? Gustav increased his running speed while activated dash. Dash has been activated, swoosh. Gustav's increase in speed made him arrive in front of the blood wolf in a few seconds, but just as he wanted to attack it again, the blood wolf howled once more. Oh whoa! Its eyes turned from dark red to crimson and started glowing very bright. The darkness further enhanced its fierceness. Its fur turned from brown to red. The creature looked intimidating, but Gustav couldn't sense any threat from it even with its transformation. He didn't want to waste dash, which only had about 8 seconds left, so he quickly moved forward and threw his fist towards its chest. Bam! The first collision made Gustav understand what change the bloodwolf's transformation brought about to its body. It was like he was hitting steel, but Gustav didn't pause because right now he was still very much quicker and stronger than the bloodwolf, and with his increase in speed his punches carried more weight than before. Bam! 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 Gustav didn't hold on for even a second as his punches tossed the bloodwolf around like a rag doll. Chest, face, abdomen, left rib area, right rib area, E, T, C. Gustav's fist danced around the body of the bloodwolf. 1 second, just as Dash got to 1 second, Gustav poured strength into his left arm and swung it out at full force. Bang! His fist slammed heavily into the face of the bloodwolf, causing its fangs to break into two as it was sent flying backwards. A skull-cracking sound rang out as blood jetted out from a tiny hole on its head. Bam! Its body collapsed on the ground again, but this time Gustav didn't want to be fooled by it again. He dashed towards its body on the ground. Bang! 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 Sounds of collision echoed in the dark of night. Back in the neighborhood, the cops had arrived and Angie was leading them towards the direction of the sparse forest behind the residential area. An ambulance had arrived and the people living inside that apartment had been rushed to the hospital. A married couple that stayed in that apartment. Both of them had their limbs and parts of their body bitten off by the blood wolf, but they were still alive. This was because they were mixed bloods, but it was obvious that they were on the weak side. They only survived because mixed bloods were tenacious enough to stay alive for longer periods unless their head was torn off. Normally they would just be given a healing pill to help regrow their limbs, but due to the late arrival of the health department, they had already lost too much blood and energy, so some health procedures needed to be put in place first before they could give them the pill. Luckily no one lost their life. The gathering of everyone outside of the apartment was what grabbed the attention of the blood wolf and caused it to come out. The cops were dressed in some black armored-looking suits, carrying some technological-looking weapons with them. The suit had blue lines all over the body that glowed in the dark of the night as they transversed towards the sparse forest region. They had a sci-fi-like helmet covering their heads. That person must be dead already, Chief. Why are we bothering to do this? And he lead the mixed breed away. There's no way we're going to find it. One of the male cops voiced out. He's not dead. He's a mixed blood, so I'm sure he cannot die easily. Angie voiced out with a dissatisfied look as glared at the male cops with a thin frame. It doesn't matter if he's a mixed blood. That's a level 2 mixed breed. Only a step 3 Zulu ranked mixed blood can defeat it. Is he a step 4? From your description, he's just a kid around your age. He's definitely. Before the male could complete his statement, the cop at the front interrupted. I can sense a person up ahead, approximately at our 10 o'clock 78 meters away. It was a female voice. The rest of them had looks of bafflement because they didn't hear her say animal, they heard her say person. At this point, they were already transversing through the forest of sparse trees. It has to be Gustav, Angie prayed internally because she was starting to get scared after hearing the statement of the cop. She could already tell that Gustav was a Zulu ranked, which shocked her greatly, but she didn't think he would be step 3. Subject is approaching. I repeat, subject is approaching. The female in front was the one with the scanner, reading the environment around them. After a few more minutes of running, they could see a silhouette coming towards their direction up ahead. In a few more seconds they could finally see the figure of the person clearly, who happened to be a teenage boy with dirty blonde hair and torn blue sweater stained with blood. Gustav! Angie shouted out as she ran with a face full of smiles. The cops wanted to stop her at first since they were supposed to inspect him first, but she was too fast for them. She arrived before Gustav and locked him in a tight embrace. Gustav's eyes widened as received an embrace from the opposite sex, for the first time in his life. Her arms were wrapped around his back and her chest pressed tightly to his, with his face only a few centimeters away from the side of her neck. The warmth and her body fragrance were nothing like he had ever felt before. It was sending such electricity to his brains that he forgot to return the embrace, and for that short moment his mind was disconnected from the world. Hey, are you all right? Angie moved back and held his shoulders as she questioned with a look of concern. Gustav finally snapped out of his reverie and nodded slightly. Hey boy, how are you still alive? The same man who was speaking earlier questioned, but just as he did he received a punch from one of the cops in front. Be polite. Another feminine voice was heard as one of them walked forward while removing the helmet on her head. A beautiful feminine face was revealed. Chief, why did you hit me? The man grunted out in pain as he held his chest. Shut up, she said as she walked towards Gustav and Angie. Are you all right? She questioned. Gustav stared at the beautiful female who sported red hair with white strands. I'm good, he answered. You're not hurt anywhere? Or do we have to call medic? She questioned again. I said I'm fine, Gustav answered with a slightly pissed off look. Good, where did the mixed breed escape to? Tell us the direction so we can go after it, she demanded. They felt the mixed breed must have fled after sensing them approaching, since mixed breeds had good senses. Escaped? Gustav questioned. Yes, in which direction did it escape to? She repeated her question. It didn't escape, I killed it, Gustav answered with an aloof expression. Silence. Everyone stared at him with disbelieving expressions as if he had just spouted out nonsense. Hey boy, are you having some kind of brain malfunction or something? You're wasting our time. In which direction did it head to? The same man shouted out from the background again. I just told you that I killed it. Gustav spoke while bringing out the storage button in his pocket. Tap. He tapped on it twice and also tapped a part of the holographic projection that appeared above it. Sing! The battered corpse of the blood wolf appeared with a flash of blue light. What? Everyone stared at the body of the blood wolf with a look of bewilderment. Chapter 43. Sing! The battered corpse of the blood wolf appeared with a flash of blue light. What? Everyone stared at the body of the blood wolf with looks of bewilderment. The head of the blood wolf was only hanging to its neck by a small thread-like red tissue. Holes the size of a fist could be seen all over its body, and fresh blood still dripped out of them. Its face was extremely sunken. It was obvious that the blood wolf had taken one hell of a beating before its death. Everyone still stared at Gustav with surprise. He must be a step 3 Zulu ranked, or maybe a step 4. They had come to this conclusion after seeing the body of the blood wolf. The cop who was speaking beforehand became dead silent after seeing the proof appear before them. Every rank had 4 steps, and those steps need to be passed through before progressing to the next rank. Right now Gustav was a step 1 Zulu ranked, but these cops had mistaken him for a step 3. This really surprised them because they felt only kids with high-graded bloodlines would be able to reach step 4 so fast, and this part of the city was more on the rural side. It was impossible to find a mixed blood with a very high-graded bloodline here. Even Angie was only D-grade. The reason she was able to go against the Bloodwolf was due to her bloodline ability being speed-related. When Angie was first born she had one horn, but later she grew another, and when that happened she became faster in speed. She wasn't even Zulu-ranked mixed blood, yet her speed was close to that of Gustav's. That device in his hand, the woman who happened to the leader noticed the storage button. "You attend Echelon Academy?" the woman inquired. "Yes, any problem with that?" Gustav replied while putting the body of the wolf back in his storage device with a slight scoff escaping his mouth. That makes sense now, she thought internally. Echelon Academy has always been known to be the best in raising mixed bloods and also having high-graded ones. If it was another school within the city she would still be in disbelief, but Echelon Academy was said to have the best students with potential. She had no idea that Gustav was just an E+ grade right now. The other officers too thought it made sense. "I am Officer Betty and these are my subordinates." The woman finally introduced herself, and reached out her hand to shake Gustav. Gustav returned the handshake and turned to the side to leave. "Let's go, Angie," he said as he walked forward. "Please wait, would you like to give us the corpse of the Bloodwolf for inspection?" Officer Betty asked. "No," Gustav answered without looking back. Angie followed beside him and stared at the side of his face occasionally. She could sense that Gustav didn't like being around people and it bothered her, but she didn't want to intrude, so she decided not to ask for now. "Such arrogant bastard, that's the way they all are," one of the men voiced out from the side as watched Gustav leave with Angie. This made them further believe that Gustav was truly a student of Echelon Academy, as it has been said to be a school where arrogant brats attend. "Well, we can't do anything about it, he did kill it himself," Officer Betty said. "I wish I was that powerful without having to use these tools." One of the men sighed in dissatisfaction and adoration as he stared at the departing Gustav. "What is going on with these creatures nowadays, Chief? I wonder how they keep getting in." The man with the thin frame spoke. "No one knows. HQ won't send us more troops to work with and conduct a proper investigation since this place happens to be on the more local side. Also, this should be the work of the MBO, but those bastards won't bother showing up for things like this." Officer Betty brought out a cigarette and lit it as she spoke. Puff. Her look of frustration calmed a bit as she blew out a small cloud of smoke from her mouth and nostrils. "Chief, we're still on duty," one of the men reminded her. "Shut up," she said and threw the cigarette to the floor. "We still need to write down a report, so Sam, Brian, and me could go ask the neighbors about the incident. Fred and Rain, scout this area." Officer Betty gave out those set of instructions and started walking in the direction of Gustav and Angie. The police force was different from the MBO. They had different duties. MBO dealt with anything related to bloodline, while the police force was equipped to deal with normal crimes. What happened in this neighborhood was supposed to be dealt with by the MBO, but the neighborhood didn't think of calling the MBO because it would be a waste of time. The MBO detested this part of the city, and when it came to weak monsters like a level 2 mixed breed, they would ignore it, feeling it was beneath them to bother themselves with such weak creatures. Most of the officers in the police force were low-ranked mixed bloods. A lot of them didn't surpass the Zulu rank, including the bunch that arrived here. Some of them never even got to channel their bloodline past the 3rd point, but their equipment and technological arms made up for that. Still, the police force was seen as low due to this factor, and most failed mixed bloods tend to go for it rather than trying to join the MBO. Gustav and Angie discussed the incident on the way back to the neighborhood, and Gustav realized that this wasn't the first time this was happening. It had been happening for a while now. Occasionally mixed breeds would find a way to cross the border, and this part of the city always suffered from that. She even added that residents around this area had lost their lives to such incidents in the past. This had Gustav wondering how such a situation had been happening but was unknown to the general public. Was never broadcasted by any news channel, either was it seen on any media platforms. Did they not complain to the authorities? How did such situations get swept under the rugs? Gustav couldn't understand how and why the situation hadn't been rectified. Angie explained to him that the situation only occurred occasionally, and since the mixed breeds never infiltrated past the edge of the city, the government were alright with it. Even though 1 or 2 people died, it wasn't a big deal for them. Gustav had always known that society was shitty, so he wasn't all too surprised by this. They later arrived in the neighborhood and everywhere became chaotic again after the neighbors saw that Gustav was alright. Right now up to 50 people within the neighborhood had gathered around their building. People started thanking Gustav for leading the blood wolf away. The man whose life Gustav saved was in tears thanking Gustav. Gustav was new to this kind of situation, so he didn't know how to respond. He only smiled and nodded at them. A lot of other young people his age flocked around him and praised him with reverence. Host has achieved charm. Gustav finally saw a notification he had been waiting on for the past 2 months appear in his line of sight. He couldn't express the way he felt at this time, but it wasn't a bad feeling in any way. It till around 10 p.m. in the evening before things settled down. Chapter 44. The neighborhood later found out that Gustav killed the blood wolf and were pleasantly surprised. They treated Gustav with more respect after hearing that. The cops had questioned people about the incident, including Gustav and Angie. It wasn't till around 11 p.m. before people started entering their apartments. Gustav was invited by Angie's parents for dinner that night. He wanted to decline initially, but he couldn't refuse Angie's persuasion. Even though he found it annoying, it was a trait he still admired about her. It was Gustav's first time entering their apartment, so obviously, he looked around the living room. He noticed that it was no different from his in size. It also looked quite humble, unlike his that had a lot of expensive gadgets and the likes. The meal was ready in no time, which Gustav was grateful about because Angie wouldn't stop talking. They proceeded to the dining and started feasting on the meal after a small family prayer was done. All this was still very new to Gustav. He never even knew that family prayer was said before a meal, since he couldn't remember the last time he had one of those. Seeing everyone around him dig in, Angie, her mother, father, and brother, gave Gustav a kind of weird feeling, but not in a bad way. He also joined in. "Gustav, what about your parents? Why do you live alone?" Their father, who happened to be a very outspoken person, was the first to ask this question while they were having dinner. "I don't have parents," Gustav answered and proceeded to place another spoonful of food in his mouth. The dining area became silent for a while, but Gustav didn't seem bothered as he was still eating his food without a look of worry. "Sorry about that," Angie's father said with a look of concern. They all wondered how he was living alone, how he was able to afford an apartment and living expenses, but they felt they might intrude on his privacy even more, so no further questions were asked. "There's no need for apologies." Gustav waved his hand to dismiss the weird atmosphere. "He really isn't bothered?" Angie stared at Gustav's face for a while before looking down to focus on her food. She didn't know why, but she felt Gustav seemed quite pitiful. In a few minutes dinner ended, but Angie's father still wanted to talk to Gustav about something. Gustav later went back to his apartment around midnight. The last night's event opened his eyes more to the nature of the world. He wondered if he would have truly tried to save people if the system hadn't given him the quest, or if he was powerful enough. After joining the MBO, would he also ignore such things happening? He knew for sure that he would have helped Angie, but what of the others? Gustav felt his state of mind had been kind of messed up since he killed Paul. The conscience and human emotions he used to feel towards people were slowly becoming distant. There were only 2 people he mostly showed his warm side to, which were Miss Amy and Boss Danzo. Also, he was slowly starting to warm up to Angie. He didn't know if it would continue like this or not, but he had decided not to overthink. He would figure everything out with time. His main goal right now was to become powerful enough so no one would control his fate, or how his life is supposed to be. He wanted his life to go in the direction he willed. If someone was going to piss him off, he didn't want to have to hide anymore. The sufferings he had gone through in the past, he had promised to never let it happen again. The next morning, Gustav and Angie went to school together again. Angie has memorized the exact time he left the house and made sure to bump into him every morning so they would leave together. Angie noticed that Gustav seemed to look more attractive to her than yesterday, but she just couldn't figure out why. What she didn't know was, she wasn't the only one who had such thoughts. Even when they were walking through the streets, anyone who noticed Gustav could not stop staring at him. Even if they took their face away, they would still secretly stare in his direction after he had passed. Gustav was starting to enjoy Angie's company, even he still found her annoying since she always went out of her way to help others. There was a time he got to school late because she decided to chase a pickpocket who stole from a grandma. She always wanted to help even when it wasn't needed. Gustav's daily activities resumed as usual. The kitchen was the first place he visited as expected. After that were classes. The classes today seemed to lack life since none of them were that of Miss Amy's. Gustav had lost interest in normal classes except for science. He still found science interesting, especially since he's been having some thoughts lately. He's been thinking of turning the second empty room into a kind of small science lab. Last night when he killed the blood wolf, that was where he placed the body. He couldn't help but smile after remembering the bountiful rewards he received as his mind went back to yesterday's events. Gustav stood in front of the body of the blood wolf. His fists were dripping with blood and he was still in the mutated bull form. The blood wolf had stopped regenerating and it was on its last breath. I knew there was going to be a limit. Gustav was studying the regeneration of the blood wolf since he also had regeneration. He had cut himself before to test out his regeneration and noticed that based on his energy points, he could regenerate infinitely. The problem was his regeneration was slower, which meant it wouldn't be able to keep up in a fierce battle if he was receiving serious injuries at a fast pace. He knew this was because regeneration was still at level 3, which made him hopeful about future levels bringing faster regeneration. Gustav walked forward, raised his right foot with intensity, and stomped down on the neck of the blood wolf with force. Bam! Splurt! Blood splattered in all directions as the blood wolf's head was almost completely uprooted from its neck. Even though it wasn't completely uprooted, the wolf was already dead since it couldn't regenerate from this. Emergency quest complete. Rewards, 5000 EXP, plus 2 attributes points added to all attributes. Level up for all skills and abilities. Recreation ability now operational. Host has leveled up. Gustav was wowed by the rewards, but before he could even start to check them, another notification popped up. You killed a blood wolf mixed breed. 5000 additional EXP. The last notification was the one that shocked him greatly. Another beast transformation bloodline found. Does host wish to add mutated blood wolf transformation to beast transformation bloodline? Yes/no. Gustav noticed his foot was still on the blood and gory mess. The blood wolf's neck had turned too. He lifted his foot, and the last system notifications disappeared. When he placed his foot back there, the system notification appeared again. This means I can also add mixed breeds to the beast bloodline I collected from Paul. Gustav was very excited when he figured this out at that time. Yes, he quickly called out in his mind. Extracting mutated blood wolf, extraction process. 1%, extraction process, 50%. Gustav watched as the bar went up till it got to 100%. Mutated blood wolf has been successfully added to beast transformation bloodline. After the completion, he put the blood wolf's corpse in his storage device and started heading back. Finding out about being able to add mixed breeds to his beast transformation bloodline made Gustav feel a rush of excitement run through his body. He had done extensive research on mixed breeds the night before, and now he had another goal in mind. This neighborhood might actually be a blessing in disguise, Gustav thought with a wide grin on his face. Chapter 45. This neighborhood might actually be a blessing in disguise, Gustav thought with a wide grin on his face. At the end of the day, Gustav was walking towards Miss Amy's office as usual. On his way, he received a lot of glares from different students as usual, but this time, it was a different kind of gaze. The females glanced at him with subconscious desire, while the males glanced at him with a slight look of envy. Everyone couldn't help but wonder, why does he look so attractive today? What Gustav didn't know was, his method of walking, the way he stared with a look of focus, the aloof expression, Everything action performed by him had improved into an attractive kind of way that made others notice him even if they didn't want to. His style of walking now was very graceful. His dirty blonde hair had a certain glow to it. Its silkiness stood out. It was smoothly packed to the back with some strands falling in front of his face. Gustav's blonde hair was previously the falling type, that almost reached his shoulder. He woke up this morning and decided to style it this way instead. Gustav passed by the side of a female in smooth black long hair. Her face was so beautiful that it could be mistaken for a doll. Her skin was pale white, and her face was the heart-shaped type with a pointed nose. Her looks were not short of perfect. She was about 54 and her body seemed to have matured completely at first glance due to the massive peaks in front of her chests. She turned to the side to stare at Gustav, who had just passed. She was dazed for a few seconds seeing his elegance, but she quickly came back to normal. What's wrong with me? I already turned him down in the past. She pursed her lips and turned around to face where she was headed. But did he not see me at all? He didn't even spare me a glance. She turned to the side to stare at Gustav, who kept walking forward without turning to stare at anyone. Humph. I refuse to believe that this trash will not stare at me even once. As she walked forward, she kept staring at the side, waiting for Gustav to turn around and stare at her, but to her disappointment, Gustav kept walking forward without doing that. She found it strange and still kept staring at Gustav's back for a few seconds before a loud shout was heard. Hey, Yuhiko! A female student sporting chestnut-colored hair called out from ahead while waving her hand. I'm coming, she replied and turned back around to start walking towards the other female student. What are you looking at? The other female student questioned after noticing Yuhiko's weird state of turning around occasionally. Nothing, Mara, let's head to the dojo. Yuhiko replied and focused her sight forward. Alright, remember you still have to duel with that Masuba and you have to defeat him, or you'll go on a date with him, Mara said with a frown. I don't date idiots. Especially one who lost to an F grade, Yuhiko said in disgust. I still wonder who that F grade is. They say his physical strength is higher than a normal mixed blood and he was able to defeat Masuba in a second. The only problem is he is always on the last floor and doesn't like to associate with anyone, so there's no way to figure out whether this is true or not. Mara analyzed with an intrigued look. It doesn't matter because it doesn't change the fact that a B grade lost to an F grade. Do you think I would also lose to whoever that person is? Yuhiko had an intense look as she questioned Mara. Of course not, whether he has an insane physical strength or not. Battling is not all about strength. After all, and sure you would win, Mara said with a smile. Humph. That Masuba is a disgrace yet still flaunts, and has the guts to ask me on a date. I will make sure I crush him today, Yuhiko said with a look of disgust. Gustav got to Miss Amy's office after a few minutes. On his way, he had been thinking of how to use atomic manipulation bloodline in a battle, so he wasn't so focused on his environment. He knew he passed by the side of Yuhiko, who was hailed as the most beautiful girl in the entire school. Also, the same girl who crushed him 3 years back, but he was too busy with his thoughts to even care about glancing at her. Yuhiko was surprised, since there had never been a time when Gustav saw her that he wouldn't stare at her with adoration. His eyes would be full of praise until she was out of sight. She found it a bit bothersome, but she enjoyed being worshipped, so inwardly she would smile, while totally ignoring Gustav. She had expected this to happen again today. Miss Amy and Gustav headed to the dojo afterward. 2 hours after getting to the dojo, Gustav was about to finish training for the day. He had already sparred with Miss Amy, which of course ended in his loss. Miss Amy was always merciless when training Gustav, and Gustav's speed didn't come close to hers in any way. Even if he was to use sprint, he still wouldn't be able to touch Miss Amy. He would receive barrages of kicks and punches that always made him feel like he was hit by a moving train. Miss Amy would say after defeating him, "I'm not even using up to 20% of my full strength, you weakling." Gustav was always amazed by her strength. The most absurd part was, Gustav had never seen Miss Amy use her bloodline abilities. Whenever they sparred, she would always dodge his attacks as if she could predict them. She only trained Gustav in combat, but she allowed him to make use of his abilities, which she still didn't understand till now. Gustav only sparred for 1 hour with Miss Amy, and he used the rest to train solo. He was currently attacking a robotic-looking machine. This was a similar battle android to the one Endrick battled against when the inspectors arrived close to 3 months back. He had been using disintegration ability repeatedly. He wanted to train it well enough to use in combat, but it was proving impossible. This was the ability tied to the bloodline he got from Ben. The day he extracted this ability, he found out that it was very slow and impractical to use in combat. It was a very good ability, but it's slow. The day he killed Paul, he used this ability to disintegrate billions of Hung Joe and Ben's brain cells. The ability was able to make anything it came into contact with disappear. Gustav had been testing it out repeatedly. It was very slow and causing disintegrations from an atomic level. Luckily, Gustav only focused on the cerebrum when he was using it, which made it faster. When he tried disintegrating something larger, it would take time before he could completely make it disappear. Bam! 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 Gustav's hand glowed a milky light that only he could see as his palm struck the 2-meter-tall android. It was barely visible, but whenever he struck a part of it, that part would reduce a bit. It would compress slightly, but it wasn't due to his strength, it was due to the disintegration ability. Gustav squatted as he dodged the swung-out left arm of the android and threw out his palm towards its side. Bam! Contact was made again. This time the left side of the metallic android sunk in by an inch. It's improving, but... Gustav was in his thoughts, and was about to throw out another attack when he heard voices coming from outside. He paused his attack and moved backward. Activate sleep mode, Gustav said. Going into sleep mode. A robotic voice was heard as the android shut down. Dash. Here? Dash. Yes, this is the dojo. Dash. Just call him out already. Dash. You call him out, isn't that why you're here? Gustav could hear the voices of some people coming from outside. Young masculine and feminine voices could be heard in some sort of argument. Looks like they finally grew some balls. Gustav turned around and started walking towards the door. Time to collect more compensations. A wide grin could be seen on Gustav's face as he got to the door of the dojo and slid it to the side. Chapter 46. Looks like they finally grew some balls. Gustav turned around and started walking towards the door. Time to collect more compensations. A wide grin could be seen on Gustav's face as he got to the door of the dojo and slid it to the side. Immediately Gustav slid open the wooden doors. What appeared in his line of sight were 2 boys and girls. They looked to be teenagers like him, and he could recognize 2 of their faces. 2 of the boys were among the students that watched the fight between him and Aurora, along with Masiba. The other 2 girls were unknown to him. The 4 of them immediately stopped arguing after seeing Gustav appear. Is that him? The girl on the right sporting black and purple hair questioned one of the boys. Yes, he's the one. One of the boys who had a chubby look answered. What? He looks so tiny and weak. The second girl, who sported brown hair, spoke with a look of ridicule. The 2 boys' faces paled as they heard that. I thought it was going to be someone more intimidating. The girl with black and purple hair spoke again. He looks like a pretty boy. How could Masiba lose to this feathered-looking person? The other girl sporting brown hair spoke again. The both of them spoke like Gustav wasn't standing in front of them. The faces of the boys paled again upon hearing the conversation of the girls. They stared in Gustav's direction with a frightful look. Surprisingly, Gustav didn't even look bothered. He just stared at the girls like they were some clowns performing a circus act. He's right here, you know? The chubby boy couldn't bear it anymore and finally spoke, since he was afraid of Gustav misunderstanding the situation. He didn't want Gustav to think he was also among those insulting him. What's this? You're scared of him? The female sporting brown hair questioned with a look of disgust. If you don't have anything tangible to say, I will return to my training. I have better things to spend my time on than wasting it on watching a circus act play out in front of me. You two should get your circus monkeys out or here, Gustav said to the two boys and turned around to enter the dojo once again. Hiss, did he just call us? How dare this? The female on brown got mad immediately and wanted to approach Gustav, but the other girl dragged her back. Remember the rules? The girl sporting purple and black hair questioned with a reminding tone. When the girl on brown heard that, she calmed down. One of the rules forbids fighting within the premises of the dojo. Fighting was only allowed through duels, and failure to comply would result in a permanent ban. Don't worry, Senior Yahiko will take care of him for us, the girl sporting purple hair whispered in the ears of the other girl as she smiled. Gustav's ears caught what they said even though he was already about to close the door. Perception had increased his 5 senses so he would hear even the tiniest of whispers so long as they were within the range of detection. Please wait. The boys were the first to call out to Gustav before he could close the doors. What is it? Gustav asked while turning his head to the side. Masuba would like to invite you to watch his duel with Yahiko on the 2nd floor, the chubby boy answered. Yahiko would also like to invite you to watch the duel, the girl sporting purple and black hair spoke. Is that why you all are here? Gustav asked. Yes, the group of 4 nodded. Not interested. Gustav turned around after answering. What? The 2 girls were surprised that Gustav would turn them down even after hearing the name of the person who was inviting him. No one in the dojo could claim they hadn't heard of the most beautiful and powerful girl in the dojo. The boys weren't surprised, as they were already used to this cold attitude since Gustav had turned down their friendship several times. Please, Senior Gustav, Masuba is willing to do anything for you to attend, the other boy wearing a pair of glasses spoke. Oh, Gustav looked interested after hearing that. Is that so? He came out of the dojo again as he questioned. The boys nodded in affirmation. That's good, but before I can decide to come with you, these rude girls must apologize, Gustav demanded. What? I'm not apologizing to this. Before the girl with brown hair could even complete her statement, Gustav interrupted her. All right, we're done here. Gustav turned around once again to head in. Please wait. The boys called out to him, but he didn't answer. He went in and slammed the door shut. It was after he went in that the brown-haired girl realized her blunder. You know Senior Yahiko will take it out on you when she hears the reason for us failing to bring him with us, the girl on purple and black hair said with a sigh. Even the boys were sulking because they knew Masuba was likely to punish them if they failed. The girl on brown had a look of fright before speaking. Let's call him out so we can apologize. I don't think we have any other choice right now. They started knocking on the doors after that. After a few seconds, Gustav came to answer them again. This time a look of annoyance could be seen on his face as he demanded for the girls to apologize on their knees this time. How could you? The girl sporting brown hair was about to speak again when Gustav interrupted. I'm going back, and then. He turned around to leave once again, but this time the girl sporting purple hair quickly reacted by kneeling and dragging the one with brown hair down with her, as they begged for forgiveness even though looks of unwillingness were written all over their faces. Gustav was smiling inwardly after seeing this, but his outward expression was still the same. Let's go then. On the second to the last floor, a small stage that was similar to the one Gustav and Aurora had their first duel was placed in the northwest corner of this floor. A group of young boys and girls could be seen gathered around this stage. There were about 20 of them, and they seemed to be waiting for something, or in this case someone. 2 of these people were Masuba and Yukiko. Masuba was on the left side of the stage while Yahiko was on the right. The same inspectors that played as referees for Gustav's and Aurora's fight were also present, and they were all waiting for the same person before the duel commenced. Yukiko had a look of annoyance on her face. What's taking so long? I can't stand this idiot staring at me in this kind of way. I want to stomp on his face as quickly as I can. She thought in her mind as she stared at Masuba, who was also exchanging glances with her. Masuba was staring at Yahiko with a longing gaze. He stared at her like she was a holy being, a deity that wasn't supposed to exist on the earth, and truly Yahiko looked the part. She was unrealistically beautiful. Just look at this idiot, He practically has drool leaking out the side of his mouth. No different from how that guy used to look at me, humph. An image came to her head, but she looked quite disturbed as another image interloped with the one she first pictured. Just what was? She didn't get to complete her thought when loud voices were heard in the vicinity. Dash. He's here. Dash. Is that him? Dash. Wow, he looks quite weak. Dash. How could Masuba have lost to him? Dash. But he also looks pretty, hee hee. Everyone turned around to stare at the group of 5 who had just arrived. The person in the middle was who they were referring to. Yuhiko stared at the group approaching with a look of shock visible on her face. That's... How could he be the one? Chapter 47. Yuhiko stared at the group approaching with a look of shock visible on her face. That's... How could he be the one? Yuhiko stared at the blonde boy in the middle approaching with an unbothered expression. Another surprising issue for her was Gustav was staring in her direction, but there was no look of adoration and worship visible like before whenever he saw her. In fact, there was no expression. She couldn't read his thoughts through his expression. Whether he was happy or sad to see her, excited or angry, there was no reaction whatsoever. He was staring at her, as if he had never seen her before, which made her feel dumbfounded. Hey Gustav, over here! Masuba waved at Gustav as he called out. This confirmed Gustav's identity, which Yuhiko was questioning in her heart earlier. Gustav walked over to the left side, ignoring the glares and words of the crowd. My compensation for attending your duel is 20,000. Gustav immediately voiced out once he got to Masuba's side. Masuba had a wry smile on his face as he heard that. All right. He nodded after answering. And for every 2 minutes I spend here, the amount increases by 5,000. Gustav added. Masuba's eyes nearly budged out of their sockets, but after a second he nodded in defeat. I hope you take your time when battling her, although I doubt that will happen, Gustav said internally. Is that the person you lost to, Masuba? A female who was standing beside Yuhiko questioned with a look of disgust. Yes, this is Gustav. Masuba acted as a bridge to introduce Gustav to both Yuhiko and the girl beside her. He had no idea that they already knew Gustav. Ha ha! This is truly funny. You lost to trash and you believe you can win, Yuhiko? You must be dreaming. The female beside Yuhiko, who was sporting chestnut-colored hair, stared at Gustav like he was a fraud. Gustav returned the stare with a look of unconcern. He's just a useless bum who only knows how to take bloodline enhancement drugs. How is he even here in the first place? She voiced out again. The question she asked was also what Yuhiko was wondering. How is he here? How is he able to gain access to the last floor? Masuba was dumbfounded by the statement the girl made. He turned to stare at Gustav before looking back at the girls. Dash. Bloodline enhancement drugs? That makes sense. Dash. There's no other way I can see an F grade defeating a B grade. Dash. So Masuba was just defeated unfairly? The students within the vicinity spoke amongst themselves after hearing that. Masuba had already realized that they must have known each other before this. With the place getting chaotic, one of the supervisors finally spoke. Gustav won the duel with Masuba fair and square. Do not discredit a genuine person's win. Supervisor Bola disclosed. He was a supervisor, so he would know this much. If a person was to use enhancement drugs, he would be able to tell at first glance. His disclosure made the place quiet down. There was no way anyone would believe the girl over Supervisor Bola. Some of them even started giving her weird looks, wondering what she was aiming at. If he is trash, then everyone must be trash too, since I'm pretty sure he would defeat everyone here. Masuba laughed as he spoke, causing everyone to turn speechless again. They thought about what he said and realized that most of them here couldn't even defeat Masuba. The strongest spectator here would only tie with him, so his words kind of make sense, but they still had unwillingness in their hearts. The chestnut-haired girl gritted her teeth in annoyance. Yuhiko, remember our plan. Now that we know who the F grade is, the plan must be executed with twice the intensity. She whispered in the ears of Yuhiko. You don't have to tell me, Kira. That look on his face irks me to no end, Yuhiko said while staring at Gustav, who didn't even try to defend himself when the others were speaking. Gustav, do you think I will win? Masuba asked with a smile. He seemed to have taken Gustav as his friend already with the way he was speaking. No, you will lose, Gustav answered bluntly. Masuba felt like he was shot in the head after hearing that, but he didn't back down. Let the participants of the duel climb onto the stage now. Supervisor Samsuna spoke while making gestures at the stage. Yuhiko and Masuba climbed onto the stage after hearing that. Masuba smiled as he stood in front of Yuhiko. To think you can defeat me when you got beat up by trash. Just like Kira said, you must be deluded, Yuhiko stated with a dark look. Ah, you're still calling him that. TSK, I hope you don't end up as I did. Masuba shook his head in pity as he spoke. Supervisor Samsuna questioned if both sides were ready, which they reacted to by nodding. Let the duel begin, he added. Hiya! Masuba was dashed towards Yuhiko immediately after the go-ahead was given. Black scales suddenly started appearing all over his body as he dashed forward with speed, while Yuhiko reacted by removing a strand of hair from her head and stretched it forward. Swai! Masuba swung out his palm at this time towards Yuhiko. The strand of hair Yuhiko stretched out suddenly turned into a baseball bat, which she swung towards the incoming hand. Bam! The bat slammed fiercely into Masuba's right arm, but was smashed to pieces upon making contact. Masuba smiled as his arm kept moving forward towards Yuhiko. Zuihai! Yuhiko crouched her body downwards, dodging the arm as she pushed out her right hand, slamming it onto Masuba's right side. Bam! Contact was made, but there was no impact. This was due to Masuba's bloodline that gave him protective scales, which also made him faster and stronger. In his battle with Gustav before, he didn't even have the chance to activate it before he was knocked out. Masuba smiled. You will have to do better than that to hurt me, he said while swinging his right leg upward to meet with Yuhiko's arm. Bam! His right leg kicked her arm away. He was about to follow up with another attack when he suddenly felt heavy. Dumb! He fell to the ground on his knees with a shocked reaction. Dash! Gasp! Did his clothes just get turned into a metal-weight jacket? Someone voiced out from the crowd. That was when Masuba noticed his upper clothes were now black and metallic in kind of jacket form. Yuhiko had used her ability to change his clothes to this upon making contact earlier. It weighed more than he could handle, which affected his mobility. He wanted to pull it off of himself, but before he could do so he noticed a metal bat swinging towards his face while he was still in his kneeling position. Bam! The metal bat crashed directly into the left side of his face, smashing his nose and several of his teeth in the process. Masuba fell to the ground while spitting out broken pieces of teeth. Yuhiko was the one holding onto the bat. Masuba's left face was brutally bruised. His eye had swollen up and was looking black like that of a panda, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. Form 2, he called out in his mind as the scales on his body suddenly increased in number, each one becoming smaller than before. He grabbed onto the metal jacket, ripped them apart, and threw them to the side before jumping up with intensity. You should have just stayed down. Immediately he jumped up, a soft feminine voice drifted into his ears. Yuhiko was holding onto a pebble which she was lifting upwards. Masuba had decided he wouldn't give her the chance to do whatever she was planning and dashed out, but immediately he did, she threw the pebble towards him. Swai! What sort of dumb joke is this? Masuba smirked as he dashed forward while watching the pebble travel towards him in midair. All of a sudden his smile started to warp. First from a smile to a look of confusion, to awe and then fear, because right before his very eyes the pebble was increasing in size as it traveled towards him. Masuba wanted to move to the side to dodge, but it was already too late as the pebble had already transformed into a huge boulder that covered his entire line of sight. Bam! The boulder slammed into Masuba and kept moving forward without reducing speed till it knocked him off the stage. Yuhiko wins this duel, Supervisor Samsuna shouted out. Supervisor Bola had already dashed towards the boulder and slammed his palm into it, causing it to break to pieces. Masuba had passed out already on the ground. His scales retracted into his body, which was covered with blood. The crowd stared at Yuhiko with adoration and cheers rang out. They had already expected this, even though Masuba was also a B-grade like her. Yuhiko's bloodline was a unique creation type that gave her the ability to transform matter into whatever she wished. So even the air could be morphed into what she wanted if the right requirements were met. Supervisor Bola had placed a healing pill in Masuba's mouth, and he started healing up at a visible rate. Yuhiko did not leave the stage after winning. She stood there staring at a person in front. Everyone followed her line of sight and noticed she was staring in Gustav's direction. "Gustav, I challenge you to a duel!" she voiced out while giving Gustav an intense glare. Chapter 48. Yuhiko did not leave the stage after winning. She stood there staring at a person in front. Everyone followed her line of sight and noticed she was staring in Gustav's direction. "Gustav, I challenge you to a duel!" she voiced out while giving Gustav an intense glare. "Oh, finally she's making her move." Gustav stared at Yuhiko with an aloof expression, while internally he was smiling. Chatter. 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 The surroundings became noisy as everyone heard that. They had not expected Yuhiko to suddenly challenge Gustav, but this was a battle they wanted to see. Every one of them on the second to the last floor had heard about how Gustav easily defeated Masuba. They didn't have access to the third floor, so none of them even had the chance to see Gustav, talk less of seeing him battle. They wanted to see with their own eyes if the claims of him being strong was authentic. Most of them, after seeing Yuhiko's battle with Masuba, believed that Gustav wouldn't be able to win, while some of them didn't jump to conclusions yet after comparing the time it took both battles to finish. They all stared at Gustav with anticipation, waiting for him to accept. "I refuse," Gustav stated and turned around to head towards Masuba. Eh? The sudden refusal shocked everyone. Dash. He refused the duel? Dash. I guess he's too scared after Masuba got defeated. Dash. I would be scared too if I had to go against Yuhiko. Dash. What a coward! Why is he called the strongest then? Voices of displeasure could be heard coming from the crowd as they stared at Gustav, who was standing in front of Masuba at the moment. Surprisingly, Gustav was not in any way moved by their comments and glares. He stood in front of Masuba, who had just regained consciousness and was still seated on the ground. "My pay." Gustav stretched out his hand towards Masuba as he spoke. Masuba nearly fainted again. "At least show a little concern. I'm just regaining consciousness." Masuba was speechless. "How much is it?" Masuba questioned while gulping down spit. "Precisely 236 seconds, which is approximately 4 minutes. That brings the entire amount to 30,000 rad. Gustav held his chin as he spoke. "I wish you'd have lasted longer in the battle, but I guess you'll just have to make do with this," Gustav added with a slight look of disappointment. Masuba almost puked out blood on hearing that. "Pay up, you're wasting my time," Gustav shamelessly demanded. Masuba nodded and brought out a blue cube-looking device. He handed it over to Gustav after standing to his feet. "Gustav, you coward, accept the duel," Kira, the chestnut-haired girl, shouted out from behind. "Not worth my time," Gustav voiced out as he turned back around. Yuhiko could see the aloofness on his face, which annoyed her even more. "Duel with me, you trash! Are you scared of losing?" Yuhiko finally snapped and shouted out. "Why is she barking?" Gustav said with a casual tone. "Unfortunately, I don't have time to play fetch." His manner of talking was so smooth that his statement didn't even sound like an insult, which made Yuhiko's face twist even more. This. When did he become like this? Yuhiko couldn't understand, and she kept staring at Gustav like she was seeing another person entirely. You! She gritted her teeth in anger as she pointed at Gustav. Gustav walked past the stage, ignoring her actions. It would seem he was heading back upstairs. "What would it take for you to duel with me?" Yuhiko turned around while asking as she stared at Gustav, who paused in his tracks after hearing the question. "Finally speaking like someone who has a little brain." Gustav grinned as he turned around. "My demand is very simple." Gustav started speaking, causing everyone to place their attention on him. He probably will ask me to go out with him. I just have to make Sue. Before she could complete her thought process, she heard Gustav speak again. Money! Gustav answered bluntly. Silence. The whole place became silent again after hearing Gustav's reply. Yuhiko felt her intelligence was being toyed with. Is he being serious right now? Everyone had a thought similar to this running through their minds. How about we make a bet? Gustav added with a charming smile. 5 minutes later, Gustav was standing on the stage. In front of him was Yuhiko. They were positioned about 20 feet away from one another. Yuhiko glared at Gustav intensely while Gustav returned her glare with a calm stare. Supervisor Bola asked if both of them were ready, which they reacted to by nodding. Let the duel begin, Supervisor Bola said with an authoritative tone. Everyone had their eyes intensely focused on the stage. I won't waste time in crushing you. Yuhiko, who seemed to still be greatly mad at Gustav, had a pebble in her hand from before the duel even started. Immediately the go-ahead was given. She threw out the pebble with speed towards Gustav. Shwai! Unlike her duel with Masuba, she threw the pebble not only with more force but also increased the size of the transformation. It had only been a second since the battle began, yet a large boulder had already covered almost half of the entire stage. The boulder was as wide as the stage, and the speed didn't slow down as it traveled towards Gustav, leaving him with no place to run to. Everyone's mouth was opened wide as they witnessed this shocking scene. This kind of attack would cost a lot of energy and stamina. They stared at Yuhiko like she was a monster, but Gustav's action shocked them. He suddenly dashed towards the incoming boulder. Normally it would be impossible to dodge it, but dashing straight into it was also no different from suicide. To their surprise, Gustav suddenly accelerated to an insane speed that they couldn't follow. Although this is still in its test phase and will probably drain a lot of energy, I will try it out, Gustav said internally as he dashed out. He had activated sprint after dashing out, and was about to make contact with the huge boulder which was moving towards him in a kind of slow motion. His right hand glowed a milky light as he called out in his mind. Atomic disintegration, activate chop. Chop has been activated. Gustav raised his palm, causing the milky glow to coat his entire right palm before slicing down towards the large boulder in front of him. A white line of energy surged out of Gustav's palm, traveling forward along with his descending palm. Before Gustav's palm collided with the boulder, the white line was already cutting through the boulder, still descending along with Gustav's palm. Screeve! The boulder was cleanly severed in two, causing one half to move towards the left and the other to move towards the right. Gasp! The crowd gasped upon witnessing the incredible scene, but Gustav didn't stop moving. He deactivated sprint immediately after dividing the boulder in two, since he knew his energy would be completely spent if it remained activated. Even without sprint, Gustav could move 50 feet in a single second, so closing the gap between him and Yuhiko was an easy feat. Swoosh! He arrived in front of her in an instant, and swung out his left arm towards her face. Yuhiko was still dumbfounded by the sudden feat he performed, so she was still looking shocked. She could follow Gustav's normal speed with her eyes, but before she could react physically, his palm was already in front of her face. Pa! A crisp slap reverberated across the place. Yuhiko staggered towards the side after receiving the stinging slap on her right cheek. She could feel the hot burn, which not only caused her cheeks to redden with blood but also made her sight blurry due to the heaviness. Before she could stabilize herself, Gustav's right hand was headed for her left cheek. Pa! Another crisp slap rang out again. Waha! The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing, and before they could scream out in shock, more slaps continued to echo in the vicinity. Pa! 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 Gustav's hands didn't stop moving as his slaps landed on her cheeks alternatively. Yuhiko's cheeks were already bloodied and swollen, yet Gustav didn't stop. Pa! 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 He kept slapping her around. When he slapped her left cheek, she would stagger to the right, where another slap was waiting to send her back to her initial position. Gasp! The crowd was in shock. Dash! He is truly the strongest! Dash! How did he split the boulder? Dash. How can he be so brutal to a female? Dash. Does he have no human emotions? Some of them took their faces away in disgust while some of them continued watching with a look of astonishment. Supervisor Bola, Supervisor Samsuna, you should stop the duel now. It's obvious who the winner here is. Kira ran towards the stage while voicing out with a pale look. As the rules say, the duel cannot end until one of them either passes out or falls out of the stage, and neither of that has happened yet. Oh, before I forget, it would also end if one of them surrenders, Supervisor Bola said while preventing Kira from getting to the stage. But, how is she supposed to surrender in that state? Kira stammered with a pale look as she watched Yuhiko's formerly beautiful face turn into a punching bag, or in this case a slapping bag. Pa! This will teach you to mind your manners, Gustav said internally as he kept slapping Yuhiko's face. Normally Yuhiko would have passed out if Gustav decided to slap her with his full strength from the start, but he was purposely reducing his strength to stop her from passing out. The slaps were painful, but due to Mixed Blood's tenacity, Gustav had calculated the right amount of force needed to make sure she receives numerous amount of slaps without passing out. The way he speedily stacked her face with slaps didn't give her the chance to surrender, so she could only get tossed around while screaming in pain. He was after causing her more pain and humiliation than just having her take an easy way out by passing out in one hit. Pa! The supervisors were also starting to get sickened by the way Yuhiko was receiving the slaps, but if they tried stopping the duel they would be contradicting their rules. Luckily for them, Gustav didn't make it any harder than he was supposed to. He stopped after landing another hot slap on her face that sent her crashing out of the stage. Gustav wins the duel! Supervisor Bola swallowed saliva as he spoke. Chapter 49. Gustav wins the duel! Supervisor Bola swallowed saliva as he spoke. Even after the announcement had been made, everyone still stood in place with widened eyes as they stared at the Yuhiko on the ground. Her face was swollen than that of a pig. Her eyes and lips could be mistaken for black and red buns. Her cheeks were bloodied with parts of her facial skin torn off. Her look right now bore no semblance to that of her former. The beautiful face she always took pride in had been turned into this. It was a disturbing sight to a lot of them there. They stared at Gustav, who was responsible for doing the deed. He was climbing down the stage casually after cleaning the blood on his palms. Supervisor Samsuna arrived before Yuhiko and squatted while lifting her head slightly. This young man is truly a brutal type, he showed no mercy. Supervisor Samsuna parted Yuhiko's swollen to place the pill in her mouth. A few seconds later her face started to heal up. Her eyelids trembled slightly, proving that she was about to regain consciousness. Supervisor Samsuna turned to stare at Gustav, who was walking towards the crowd. Well, this might have been extreme but needed. I'm sure these young kids will learn humility from what they have witnessed today, Supervisor Samsuna said internally. Time to pay up, Gustav said as he got to the front of the crowd on the left. Chatter. Just transfer the money to this storage device, Gustav said and handed it over to a boy in front. Gustav started moving from person to person, performing the same actions. Dash. I still can't believe Yuhiko failed, one of them said with a look of indignation. Dash. Now we have to pay 20,000 rad each after losing the bet, this sucks. They voiced out in disappointment, but they had no choice other than to pay the money. The bet was with everyone who supported Yuhiko. They would pay that amount if she lost, but if she had won, Gustav was supposed to do whatever she willed for an entire month. Yuhiko wanted to show that she had more supporters, so she asked everyone to place their money on her winning, and she would compensate them after the duel. These teenagers could have remained neutral and decided not to support anyone, but because they wanted to please Yuhiko, they agreed to her demand. Only Masuba and the two boys that came to meet Gustav on the last floor didn't bet since they knew he was going to win. Masuba was secretly praying for Gustav to deal with her for crushing him. He didn't expect that Gustav wouldn't just defeat her but also give her the humiliation of a lifetime. All of a sudden a loud cry was heard. You bastard, how could you do that to Yahiko? Kira screamed out as she ran towards Gustav, who was busy collecting his winnings. They were only a few feet from one another, so she was able to arrive before Gustav in a second. A red line of light appeared in her hand, which she stabbed towards Gustav's chest. Well, birds of the same feathers always flock together. Since the both of you are so similar, I guess you should receive the same punishment, Gustav said internally as he swerved to the left to dodge the attack while raising his right hand and bringing it down with force. Kira watched as the palm descended upon her face, unable to react to the speed on time. Grab! Just before Gustav's palm could collide with her face, it was grabbed by Supervisor Samsuna. Kira, who had nearly tripped due to Gustav dodging, paused in her tracks. Fights are not tolerated. A duel must be scheduled before the both of you can go at each other, Supervisor Samsuna said. I couldn't even sense his approach with my perception, Gustav analyzed as he withdrew his hand. I was only trying to defend myself, Gustav stated with a straight look. There's no need for explanation, Supervisor Samsuna replied. For attacking a person out of the blue, Kira will have to pay twice the amount of the said bet, he added. Gasp. That's 40,000 rad. My entire allowance for a year. Kira stuttered as she spoke. There's no way I will be able to collect any money from father till the year runs out. Either you pay the fee or leave this premises at once. Such attitude will not be tolerated, Supervisor Samsuna said once again. Kira had a crestfallen look on her face when she saw Gustav stand in front of her again. Pay up. He stretched out his hand while speaking. In a few minutes, Gustav had collected money from everyone except Yahiko. Yahiko had regained consciousness some minutes ago. She had healed up and her face had gone back to looking beautiful, but the humiliation she felt now made her feel like covering up her face for life so no one would be able to recognize her. My payment. Gustav arrived in front of her and stretched out his hand. Yahiko's face twisted with a crazy look. Grrhh. I will have my. I don't care about that. Pay up. Gustav didn't let her complete her sentence. Yahiko gritted her teeth and reached for her storage device with a look of unwillingness. About 30 minutes later, Gustav was on Miss Amy's hoverbike. Miss Amy was driving him home today. You did good today, Miss Amy said as they streaked through the road. Hee hee, Miss Amy missed out on all the fun. Gustav laughed lightly while holding on to Miss Amy's waist from behind. I really would have liked to witness it myself, Miss Amy replied. Don't worry, Miss Amy, next time I'll inform you, Gustav said with a smile. Next time? Oh, there's going to be a next time? Miss Amy asked with a bewildered expression. The world is still full of idiots after all, Gustav answered with a look of anticipation. Just be careful and don't get too conceited, Miss Amy advised. H&M I want. Gustav nodded in reply. In a few minutes they arrived in front of the building where Gustav's apartment was located. Gustav got down from the hoverbike. Have you considered their request? Miss Amy questioned. I'm still thinking about it. In the meantime, I'm doing more research, so if I do accept, it will be when I have gathered enough knowledge, Gustav answered. It's all right. It's up to you after all. If you find yourself in a situation beyond your control, you know how to contact me, Miss Amy stated and proceeded to speed off with her bike. Sweet. Gustav waved and turned around to head for his apartment. The neighbors outside had smiles all over their faces as they greeted him with a welcoming look. Gustav got to his apartment and settled down on his reading chair. The first thing he did was to bring out his storage device. Tap. After tapping twice on it, 3 small projections were displayed. Gustav tapped on the third one. Sing! Rows and stacks of paper bills appeared in front of him. Gustav smiled as he stared at the money. A total of 480,000 rad. He muttered with a delighted tone. He reckoned that the total amount of money with him right now should be around 630,000 rad. He was now halfway to becoming a millionaire. This would have been impossible if he wasn't dealing with rich kids. A lot of workers couldn't boast of having 500,000 after working for several years, yet he had gotten that in a little over 2 months. Gustav's goal was to accumulate at least 1,000,000 before the MBO entrance test took place. He called for the system interface to open up. Host attributes, he called out in his mind. Host attributes: name, Gustav, level 5 class, EXP 6250/25,000 HP, 320/320 energy, 120/150 attributes: strength 33, perception 31, mental fortitude 30, agility 30, speed 30, bravery 30, intelligence 32, charm 31 attributes. Point 14. Gustav stared at it for a while. He had already distributed today's point earlier, and his charm points had also caught up with the others. Things were progressing as planned, but he was still left wondering about the class information up there. Also, he noticed that there was no longer Aslav behind his name. What is this about? Gustav wondered. He recalled something at this moment. The system said something about the recreation ability being operational. He remembered that this was one of the rewards he received after killing the Blood Wolf. He had been wanting to know about the recreation ability for the past 2 months now, but unlike the rest, no information popped up beneath it even if he stared at it for a very long time. He had even tried activating it the same way he activated skills like dash or sprint, but the result was the same. Now he understood that it wasn't operational all this time. Skills and abilities, Gustav called out internally. Skills and abilities: dash level 4, sprint level 3, regeneration level 3, morph level 3, join movement level 3, toxin immunity level 3, recreation level 3, bloodline acquisition level 3, chop level 6, palm strike level 4, frying level 8. I can't believe it has been leveling up all this time without even being operational, Gustav said while checking out his skills and abilities. Since he had tried to use it several times to no avail, he ignored it, so he didn't notice that it had been leveling up like the rest. Gustav focused his eyes on the skills, waiting for information to pop up beneath them so he could check out the information on recreation. In 3 seconds, information appeared under every skill and ability explaining their usage. Gustav had seen the rest before, so his eyes traveled down the list to where recreation was positioned. What? Gustav's eyes widened in shock as he read the information beneath recreation internally. Chapter 50. Gustav focused his eyes on the skills, waiting for information to pop up beneath them so he could check out the information on recreation. In 3 seconds, information appeared under every skill and ability explaining their usage. Gustav had seen the rest before, so his eyes traveled down the list to where recreation was positioned. What? Gustav's eyes widened in shock as he read the information beneath recreation internally. Skills and abilities: dash level 4, ability to increase current speed by 25 for 20 seconds, sprint level 3, multiplies current speed by 2, regeneration level 3, recover from injuries 20 times faster than normal, morph level 3, bloodline ability change hair color, skin tone and shift facial muscles, join movement level 3, bloodline ability move joints in reverse. Toxin immunity level 3, protection against slightly lethal toxins, recreation level 3, ability to combine bloodlines to create a fused bloodline that will generate a new ability entirely. Based on the compatibility of both bloodlines, the fused bloodline could range from C grade, bloodline acquisition level 3, ability to extract bloodlines and pair them with host if the right requirements are met. CF rank, chop level 6, using either a weapon or a sharp object, host can multiply the force of his strike by 3 times. Palm strike level 4. When a collision is made using this skill, it generates a force that infiltrates deep into the surface of collision. Gustav's eyes were focused on the recreation. He couldn't believe that such a skill existed all this time, and the system prevented him from using it. The possibilities of what he could achieve with this made him shiver from excitement internally. Oh wait, now that I think about it, I wouldn't be able to make use of this ability if I didn't have more than one bloodline. Gustav realized this and understood that even if the system gave him access, he wouldn't be able to use it. But now he could try it out since he currently has 3 bloodlines in total. But what would happen to the original bloodlines after I fuse them? Would I still be able to use them singularly, or would they become one entity that I won't be able to use separately? Gustav thought hard about this. He had wanted to test it out, but when these thoughts popped up, he felt he should look into it properly before thinking of using the skill. I can't try this with beast transformation or any of the three I currently have. I will need to steal more bloodlines and perform experiments on those first, Gustav concluded, but now the issue was how he was going to steal more bloodlines. He couldn't steal bloodlines out in the open because he would have to make contact with the blood located in the neck area of a person before he could get the system notification for bloodline extraction. He would need to be in a secluded environment before he could think of doing that. Gustav started to hatch a plan in his mind. He had decided he was going to move his plans for revenge forward with this situation at hand. He didn't even notice that he could now steal C-grade bloodlines until a notification rang in his head. A new monthly quest has been issued. Gustav stared at the notification with a look of anticipation. Quest: acquire a C-grade bloodline in 30 days or less. Rewards: hidden. Punishment for failure: hidden. I need to acquire a C-graded bloodline? This was when Gustav's happened to notice on the system interface that he could now extract C-grade bloodline. Gustav couldn't help but smile at this, since it came at a time when he was thinking of acquiring more bloodlines. He knew scheming would be necessary before he could get the opportunity to steal a bloodline without drawing any suspicions, yet he was glad because this meant he could finally steal bloodlines from some of the students who gave him trouble back in the past, since some of them were C-graded. Gustav brought his eyes down to the rewards and punishment section. What the heck? Everything is hidden? Gustav voiced out with a look of discomfort. This was the first time the system was hiding both the rewards and the punishment. The punishment was mostly hidden, but he had never seen both of them hidden at the same time when a quest was issued. Just what is it playing at? Gustav sighed internally in defeat. He just couldn't understand the system at times. On the bright side, the system had stopped calling him an idiot, but he still wondered why it didn't initiate a conversation with him like earlier. But Gustav knew that no matter how hard he thought of it, there was no point. It wasn't up to 3 months since he got the system, so he knew finding out the secrets it held would take a lot of time. Even though he occasionally had questioning thoughts about where the system came from and all that, he wasn't really bothered. He was just happy he encountered something like this, and right now his thoughts were still preoccupied with the present situations, so he had decided to place this at the back of his mind in the meantime. Gustav closed the system interface and tapped on the web board in front of him. A holographic projection appeared in front of him after that. Time to continue my research, Gustav muttered. In a flash, 2 days had gone by. During these 2 days, Gustav's and Yahiko's duel had been a hot topic in the dojo. Everyone on the third to the last floor heard about it also. The second floor only had 12 students that attended Echelon Academy, and they happened to be simping for Yahiko in one way or the other, so they never mentioned the fight in school. It was said in school that she lost to an grade mixed blood instead of an F grade. The third floor of the dojo had lots of students from Echelon Academy there, but because they weren't there when the battle happened, they couldn't confirm that she was defeated by an F grade. In school, the matter of her losing to someone in the dojo quickly died down after the students heard it was in grade, but in the dojo, it was a very hot topic. They heard in school that the person's name was Gustav, but no one linked it to Gustav himself because they felt it wouldn't be possible. No one expected that Gustav, who was known as Trash, was the same person who had defeated her. Yahiko didn't appear in the dojo since that day. She couldn't bear the humiliation. She was able to save her social life in the school, but in the dojo, it had been totally wrecked. Gustav wasn't even bothered by all the drama. He opened a bank account the previous day and kept his compensation money there. At present, it was Saturday in the afternoon, and Gustav had been on the web since morning. He was currently seated on his reading chair tapping onto a virtual holographic keyboard. Bringing up the previous database. A robotic-like voice rang out as holographic projections started appearing around Gustav. Tryin'! Multiple of them appeared in form of squares scattered around the place. On the projection were pictures of different kinds of beast-like looking animals. These animals bore a slight semblance to normal animals, but they were quite different when it came to body proportions and size. Not only that, but also, A lot of them had different shapes and a kind of fierce primitive look. A large, muscular-looking bunny with gigantic fangs, a tortoise similar to the size of a truck, standing on two legs, a butterfly as large as a chopper, etc. Different images of bizarre-looking creatures were displayed. Mixed breeds are truly in varieties, these types would be out of my jurisdiction, Gustav muttered with a look of amazement. Chapter 51. He had been researching on mixed breeds since the night before. He still wondered how such creatures existed on Earth, and he was only coming across one after 16 years of his life. He had found out that the mixed breed he defeated was a level 2 mixed breed which was comparable to a step 3 Zulu rank. Gustav had figured out that not all mixed breeds were the mindless type that attacked human civilizations. He also discovered that some mixed breeds were mixed bloods whose bloodlines went AWOL when awakening them, turning them into beasts. Some mixed breeds looked entirely different from any animal that used to exist on Earth, while others looked similar but quite monstrous. Wait, it's possible to exchange the bodies of mixed breeds for money? Gustav was currently staring at an article on the web that displayed this information. It read that the body of mixed breeds could be exchanged for money in laboratories. Laboratories made a lot of research in that aspect. Depending on the type of mixed breeds and their level, it could sell for good money. Gustav carried on with his research, glancing from projection to projection before a knock was heard on his door. Come! Gustav stood up and went to check it out. To his surprise, it was Angie. She was clad in a short green gown. The gown had blue floral patterns, making her look especially cute. Her beautiful silver-colored pupils with a shade of pink added a kind of uniqueness to her looks, especially with the warm smile on her face. Hello, Gustav. Angie waved immediately after Gustav opened the door. Hey, do you need something? Gustav asked immediately after noticing she was the one. He didn't want to waste time so he could go back to his research. Well, my mom asked me to invite you to dinner, Angie said while using her right index finger to twirl her hair with an obvious shy expression. Dinner? Gustav had a look of confusion on his face before slamming the door on Angie while entering his apartment. Angie. She was confused as to why Gustav would suddenly slam the door shut in her face. I guess it's a no then, Angie muttered with a dejected expression while turning around to leave. Inside his apartment, Gustav checked the time and was surprised to find out that it was 9:30 p.m. at night already. Damn, I haven't completed today's task, Gustav exclaimed. He had lost himself in researching mixed breeds, so he didn't notice that it was already late in the night. He quickly picked up his red hoodie jacket and wore it before dashing out of his apartment. By the time he arrived at the corridor, Angie had gone back to her apartment, but Gustav didn't even take notice of this. His mind was currently preoccupied with completing today's task before the time ran out. He opened the system interface to check. Quests daily, today's task 1/3. Travel 140 kilometers, status 002/120 km. Climb to a height of 900 meters, status 0/900 m. Carry a total of 2,750 kilograms, status 0/2750 kg. He had been cooped up in his apartment all day, so he hadn't completed a single task. He analyzed the task and noticed that the only tasking one among them would be lifting the required amount of weight. He could easily lift this amount of weight, but the problem was getting a particular item that weighed enough to be counted by the system. Right now the system only calculated the weight of items he carried in hundreds of kilograms. If the item wasn't up to 100 kilograms, the system wouldn't count it. In his apartment, there was not a single item that weighed up to 100 kilograms. Gustav only thought about it for a few seconds before he came up with an alternative. As for the traveling and climbing, he could easily get these two done. For traveling, he could board a hover bus to take him anywhere, while for the climbing, he could use the stairways repeatedly. Gustav dashed down the stairway and reached the bottom of the building in a few seconds. There were still people in the neighborhood, so Gustav decided to activate silent advancement along with dash to increase his speed and also make his ascent as silent as possible. Dash has been activated, Silent advancement has been activated, swoosh. Gustav immediately dashed up the stairs once again. No tapping sounds were made when he ran up the stairs even with that amount of speed. The small waves of wind he used to generate were now mild and almost completely silent. This was the first time Gustav was using silent advancement, but he was liking the ability. Not even a single person noticed him in the environment, and he'd bet he could sneak up on someone like this without their knowledge. He got to the top and descended once again before running back up. He repeated this severally before finally seeing a notification appear in his line of sight. Daily task completed, 1/3 climb to a height of 900 meters square root. Gustav descended again after seeing this notification. He used dash once and completed this in less than 20 seconds. Gustav didn't waste time before heading towards the nearest bus stop and boarding a hover bus. He calculated on the city map the closest place he could travel to, for the traveling task to be completed. He decided to head towards a particular part of the city that was close to Echelon Academy but still some miles away. In about 5 minutes he received the notification for completing the traveling quest, but now he had gotten to the destination he picked, so he had to get down from the bus. If he wanted to head back he would have to pick another. Immediately he got down from the bus, the familiar area appeared in his line of sight. The area between the residential and business class buildings. He walked a bit further ahead and noticed an uncompleted building in the distance. To be precise, there were 5 uncompleted buildings, but the one in the middle particularly stood out. Boland Construction Site 7, Gustav said inwardly as memories of that day began flooding into his mind again. He walked closer and closer to the place, staring at the building in the middle where his first bloodline stealing adventure began. He remembered almost dying at Paul's hand here. This was also the same place he decided to stop being a wimp, and where he first took a person's life. That was something he never thought he would do. Help! A scream brought him back to reality. Chapter 52. Help! A scream brought him back to reality. Gustav turned around to see a teenage girl in red clothing running from an assailant in black. Both of them were coming from the route that led to the back of the construction site. The teenage girl was dressed in a tight-fitted red gown. She had makeup on her face, making it was obvious that she was dressed for an occasion. Gustav felt that she was probably just coming from a party, or something. Both she and the assailant were faster than normal, so it was obvious that they were mixed bloods. Also, not many people were passing this area at this time. Gustav could only see about 3 people at different corners of the street. There was no telling if they were normal people or not, so they probably wouldn't be able to follow their speed if they were. The girl and the assailant were headed in Gustav's direction. He was the only one around here who actually had the chance to help her, unlike the others, but he had decided not to butt in. "Get back here, you bitch! Leave me alone, you horny bastard! When I catch you, I'll enjoy my time with you. I will never attend your party again. I will have my way with you and nothing can stop me, ha ha ha!" Their dialogue drifted into Gustav's ears as he kept walking. On closer look, the assailant was actually a teenage boy clad in black. From their conversation, Gustav had painted a kind of picture in his head about what happened. He figured the girl was probably invited to a party, and now she's about to be violated by one of the organizers. This unpopulated area was proof that this might truly be the case, since youngsters nowadays tended to like partying in places where they wouldn't be disturbed. Gustav also concluded that the boy was not scared of chasing her all the way out in the open because he probably wouldn't face the consequences of breaking the law. In other words, the boy must have a background that can exempt him. Another bastard that comes from an affluent family, eh? Gustav was tempted to butt in after analyzing the situation, but he changed his mind. It's none of my business. Let her suffer the consequences of attending such parties. Gustav kept walking forward. Don't make me use it! I don't want to ruin that sexy body of yours. Help! The female shouted out just as they were closing in on Gustav in front. Bitch, you're still asking help from another person! The boy shouted out while stretching his hand out. Fwum! A black ball of gas shot out from his palm after performing that action. The girl screamed out and ducked. Due to that action, the ball of black gas was headed towards Gustav in front. Gustav stared at the ball of gas as it approached with an inquisitive look. He analyzed it as it approached him. The girl who ducked seemed to be shouting out something after ducking. She already thought Gustav would definitely get hit, but to her surprise he swerved to the side quicker than she expected, dodging the ball of black gas. Bam! It made contact with a small sign that was 3 meters behind Gustav earlier. SSHHHSSS? A sizzling sound rang out as the sign started melting. The teenage boy was able to catch up to the girl after this. He grabbed her and lifted her from the ground with a smile on his face. You gave me so much trouble. I will take my time with you, the boy said while licking her earlobes. The girl shivered in fright as the boy's left palm traveled towards her chest. He grabbed her breasts through her clothes and started fondling them. Ah, what a great feeling, he muttered with a look of delight. Litiamigio. She struggled to free herself, but he was obviously stronger than her. Hey, you almost hit me. The boy paused his hands and stared at Gustav, who had just spoken ahead. His eyes traveled from top to bottom and from bottom to top before sneering. Who is this rat? Watch where you're going next time then, idiot, ha ha ha. Gustav looked down and smiled when he heard that. I really wanted to mind my business, but now. Gustav started walking forward slowly as he spoke. When he was only 3 feet away from them, he looked up to stare into the eyes of the boy. You just made it my business. Immediately Gustav muttered these words. He grew to the height of over 6 feet, and he stretched out his palm to grab the boy's hand. He held onto the hand the boy was using to fondle the girl's breasts, and tightened his grip around it. Clench! Crack! Kyar! The boy screamed out as the bones in his wrist area were broken in two. He let go of the girl immediately that happened and fell to the ground, crying while holding on to his right arm. The girl fell to her butt and stared at Gustav with an astonished look. Gustav raised his leg and swung it forward towards the boy's chest. Bam! The kick sent the boy flying back by 5 meters as his chest collapsed from the impact. SHHHSSHH. The boy still slid a few inches backward before his body came to a pause. The girl's eyes widened as she stared at the boy ahead. She turned her head around to stare at Gustav with a look of appreciation. Thank you, the girl said while smiling at Gustav. I didn't do it for you, Gustav said and activated dash before running forward. Swoosh! In a few seconds he was out of sight. The girl still kept staring in that direction for a few seconds before she heard a cough. The boy was still on the floor coughing out blood. Help me! The boy's voice cracked due to pain as he held his chest while speaking. Oh, what a reversal! The girl walked towards him while speaking with a ridiculing tone. She stared at him with a gloating look for a few seconds before coming to a realization. Oh, I should probably get out of here, she said in her mind and ran in the opposite direction. The boy was left there in his pool of blood. It was late in the night, so the probability of people seeing him in this particular area was not very high. He knew this since he picked the venue for the party himself. Gustav had arrived at the closest bus station after using dash twice. He didn't return to his normal size until he entered the bus. I would have killed that idiot and taken his bloodline had we not been out in the open, Gustav said internally as he sat. He had come up with a plan at that moment to get the boy's bloodline, but he discarded it because he couldn't stay for long after attacking the boy. He has wanted to lure him into Bolin construction site and perform extraction there, but he changed his mind. There were cams on the streets but not in the incomplete buildings, but if Gustav took him there was a chance he would get caught since he would take longer to extract the bloodline than to just beat him up and leave. This was also why he increased his size before hitting the boy. Maybe next time, Gustav sighed as he concluded and rested his back on the seat. Hidden quest completed. Huh! Gustav sat straight as he saw that. Quest details. Save the girl from getting caught by the assailant. Gustav's expression was full of bewilderment as he stared at the notification. I would have failed if I decided to ignore her. Gustav wanted to curse the system, but he understood that it wouldn't be called hidden quest if he was told about it beforehand. He had practically failed since he didn't get involved until after the boy's attack nearly hit him. Reward: bloodline upgrade. 5000 EXP, congratulations. Host morph ability has now evolved into shape-shifting. Shape-shifting? Gustav's eyes widened as he stared at the notification. Chapter 53. A few minutes later, Gustav had arrived back in his neighborhood. Only one daily task was left for him to complete at the moment. The time was already 10 p.m., which meant he still had 2 hours before the day ended. Gustav sighed in relief. His plan for completing the last task required him to head towards the forest area. He activated dash again and ran towards the forest area. Swoosh! In a few seconds, his silhouette streaked past the last apartment in this residential area and headed for the sparse forest up ahead. When Dash ran out, he had arrived in front of a tree in the middle of the sparse forest region. The tree was about 9 meters tall with green and blue shades. The width of the tree was comparable to that of 4 people placed together. Gustav stood in front of the tree and stretched out his hand to touch it. "This one is good," he muttered after feeling the tree up with his palm. Gustav clenched his fist, drew his arm backward, and punched out. Bam! His fist collided with the tree, causing a loud blast to ring out. A 4 inches deep hole was formed within the tree and Gustav's fist was buried inside. Gustav pulled his arm out of the hole and placed his fingers on his chin. "With my normal strength, I can only do this much. Let me put my back into it," Gustav said internally as he got into a battle stance. "Thup!" He breathed out and arched his arm back to the limit before throwing out another fist. Bang! Crack! Upon collision, this time, Gustav's fist blasted a 10 inches deep hole into the body of the tree. Cracks spread from that point to the other parts of the tree, but it was still far from falling. "I guess this is as much as I can do with my normal strength." Gustav realized that his strength was still pretty low, and his win against the Bloodwolf came from combining his strength with that of beast transformation. He had no idea that his normal strength was rivaling 3rd step Zulu ranks. Partial mutated beast transformation. Gustav activated the beast transformation bloodline and started to grow in size. His body bloated and almost tore apart his sweater. If not for the elasticity of this one surpassing the former, it would have torn already. In this state, Gustav was over 8 feet tall. He clenched his fist again. "Let's try that again," he muttered with a deep voice. Bang! He punched the tree again, causing splinters to fly everywhere as his fist penetrated deep into the middle of the tree. The tree was still standing, but only slightly. Gustav dragged the right arm back while throwing out his left one. Bang! Crack! His left fist collided with the tree and it finally gave way. The tree, which was standing proudly earlier, split apart from the bottom area. Crack! The wood at the stem area could no longer support its weight as it came crashing down. Bang! It slammed to the ground on Gustav's left. Gustav didn't transform back into his normal form. Instead, he walked towards the fallen tree. Since it had been broken down, it was now about 7 meters tall. Gustav crouched and placed his palm on the tree before gripping it. "Ugh!" he grunted while lifting the tree above his head. Just once was enough for him to hear the system notification ringing in his ear. Daily task completed. 3/3 carry a total of 2,750 kilograms. Gustav crouched down and dropped the tree gently. He slowly transformed back into human form. Just as he had expected, this tree weighed more than enough for him to complete his daily task. There were smaller trees in the area, but he decided to use them to make sure he completed the task in one go. Done. I need to start putting my daily tasks first before doing anything else for the day, Gustav said with a contemplative gaze. He has been researching mixed breeds since the night before. Since he could get EXP from killing mixed breeds and also selling their body parts, it would be a 2x win for him if he decided to start hunting them. The problem was where to look without getting himself killed, since there were mixed breeds that were more powerful than he was currently. Gustav sat down on the tree and opened the system interface. When it appeared in his line of sight, he called for Skills and Abilities panel to be displayed. Skills and Abilities. dash level 4 sprint level 3 regeneration level 3 shape shifting level 1 joint movement level 3 toxin immunity level 3 recreation level 3 bloodline acquisition level 3. Gustav's eyes were focused on shape shifting. He wanted to know if it was what he was thought it was. Shape shifting level 1, ability to copy the looks of a person when the right requirements are met. It's truly as I thought. Gustav felt like he was dreaming. He never knew he would get such an ability at a time like this. This makes everything much easier. Gustav was already thinking about how he was going to make use of the ability to the best of his benefit. He had never seen someone with a shape-shifting ability before, so he believed it must be pretty rare. Gustav decided to head back to his apartment after a few minutes of sketching plans. It was past 10 p.m. at the time when Gustav entered the building. He got to the last floor in a few seconds and walked through the corridor that led to his apartment. He noticed the silhouette of a person sitting in front of his apartment door. The lights in the corridor were dimly lit, which was why Gustav couldn't see this person properly, but due to perception he had already noticed the person from far away, and he could tell that this person was a female. Gustav walked silently towards the person with a suspicious expression on his face. He was preparing to attack or counter any form of attack if this person happened to be dangerous. He moved silently until he was only 7 feet away from the person. He could finally see the person clearly. "Angie?" he muttered with a bewildered expression as he walked towards her. Angie was seated in front of his apartment in such a way that her knees were hugging her chest. Her arms were placed in a cross format on her knees and her forehead was resting on her arms. Occasionally her head would tilt to the side and fall off her arms, only for her to subconsciously place them back on her arms. "Angie!" Gustav got to her front and called out. "Flicker!" Her eyelids trembled, and she opened her eyes, which were still heavy with sleep. "Huh!" she muttered with a confused look as her eyes cleared up and she noticed Gustav standing in front of her. "Gustav! You're back!" She jumped up with a look of embarrassment and cleaned the drool from the side of her mouth. "Yes, I'm back. What are you doing here?" Gustav asked with a confused look. Well, I noticed you weren't back since you left an hour ago, so I decided to wait in front of your apartment so I would be able to call the police or alert the neighborhood on time if you didn't show up, just in case you were in any form of danger." Angie had a look of relief as she said that. Gustav's eyes widened in shock. She did this to ensure my safety? He wanted to say something after hearing her explanation, but he couldn't find the right words. He just kept staring at her as the seconds counted. He felt a rush of indescribable emotion welling up from inside him as he noted the look of concern on her face. Angie was also staring back at him. The atmosphere was starting to turn awkward as both of them stared into each other's eyes. "I just goody that you're back now." Angie finally spoke to break the silence. "I'm going to bed now, good night." Angie turned around to head towards her apartment as she waved at Gustav. "Goody night." Gustav's voice sounded croaked as he replied to her. She turned around and smiled at him warmly before entering her apartment. Gustav got his keys and opened his door before walking in. Pat! A drop of water fell to the floor a few centimeters ahead of Gustav, which brought his mind back to his surroundings. "Huh! What's this?" Gustav touched his cheek and felt wetness. "Am I crying?" Chapter 54. Huh! What's this? Gustav touched his cheek and felt wetness. Am I crying? He had a look of disbelief when he touched his cheek and realized that a line of tears was running down his left eye. What is this about? Gustav laughed lightly and cleaned his cheeks before walking towards his reading chair. He didn't want to think about the reason, even though he practically knew why. But he had made a new decision regarding Angie. The next morning Gustav was up very early. He hadn't forgotten about how he decided his daily task would be his first activity, so he decided to do that when he woke up. It was still 5 a.m. at this time. Gustav was already used to being up this early, so it was a normal thing for him. He went out of his apartment to begin his daily task. Gustav used the same method as yesterday to finish the lifting and traveling task, but for the climbing task, he visited the dojo. Miss Amy had asked him to come there to assist her with something earlier on. It was a Sunday, but Gustav didn't attend a church because right from time, his parents were never churchgoers. A lot of people of this age weren't. In this age, people believed more in technology and alien lifeforms than a higher existence like gods. People have even claimed to be a higher existence themselves since the era of mixed blood started. Some Earthlings are seen as God themselves in this age. Engie's family was one of the people who still believed in the Christian God, so they went to church while Gustav went to the dojo after finishing his daily tasks. Around past 10 in the morning, Gustav was done in the dojo and was climbing down the stairs to the lower floors where he could get an elevator. On the third to the last floor, he ran into someone, or to be precise, some people. This third floor to the last floor was the first floor of the dojo and also the cheapest. It was the cheapest, but a lot of people couldn't afford it except for high-class families. Gustav happened to bump into his mother and brother when he got to the first floor of the dojo. They were coming from the elevator stand with a man in a black suit following them. They seemed to be immersed in a conversation as his mom could be seen laughing and smiling while the man kept tapping his junior brother's shoulder with a look of admiration. They paused when they noticed Gustav coming from the other end. "Gustav?" The mother's eyes widened upon seeing him here. Her mind went back to the last time they met, causing her to freeze. The man wondered why they stopped moving at first, but once he heard the name his face shone with understanding. Hendrik stared at Gustav with contempt. He was practically snarling like an angry animal upon seeing his face. Gustav didn't even bother sparing them another glance after taking a look at them once. He continued on his way after that and kept moving towards the elevator. As he got to their position and was about to pass by their side, a large palm grabbed onto his shoulder. Gustav paused his footsteps and stared at his left shoulder to see the man in a black suit gripping his shoulder tightly. "Young man, you lack courtesy." The man spoke with a deep voice. Gustav's sight traveled from the hand of the man up to his face. The man had slightly tanned skin with thick beards and a mustache. His build was gigantic, making him look similar to a gorilla. Every part of him was bulky, including his large palms grabbing onto Gustav's shoulder. Gustav could feel more than 1,000 pounds of weight resting on his shoulder. "What do you mean by that?" Gustav said while trying to free his shoulder from this man's grasp. "You didn't even pay respects to your mother, neither did you apologize to your brother for beating him up. What kind of kid are you?" The man brought his face down closer to Gustav's face as he spoke. "The kind that doesn't have a mother or brother. I will not apologize to dead people," Gustav said while brazenly pushing the man's hand off his shoulder. "You!" Hendrik pointed at Gustav with an angered expression. Their mother stared at Gustav like she was seeing another person. "Oh, you have the guts to talk back to an echo-ranked MBO colonel? What a brave young lad!" The man spoke with a threatening tone as he placed his palm back on Gustav's shoulder. This time he clenched Gustav's shoulder even harder than before, to the extent that Gustav's shoulder blade was starting to make bone-creaking sounds. "What does that have to do with anything? I told you I don't apologize to the dead." Gustav stood his ground even though he was starting to feel pain in his shoulder. "You will apologize, and you will do so while kneeling," the man voiced out again while increasing the force on Gustav's shoulder. He intended to make him kneel. Gustav gritted his teeth as his knees began to give way. The people in the environment that wanted to interfere earlier scattered like rats upon hearing that the man was an echo-ranked mixed blood from the MBO. Gustav could tell that the man was only using a low portion of his strength, yet he could barely fight against it. The man smiled as he clamped on Gustav's shoulder tighter, pressing him down even more. Gustav grabbed onto the man's hand with both his palms and pushed up with as much strength as he could muster, but it was still of no use. His legs were trembling due to the intense weight and slowly bending towards the ground. Hendrik watched from the side with a crazed smile. "Yes, Master JK, make him pay for touching me." This man happened to be Hendrik's tutor from the MBO, and he was referred to as JK. IYLLNOT. Gustav's face was extremely fierce at this moment. His muscles had bulged intensely, and his legs had caused slight cracks on the ground due to his pushing up. Still, everything was futile as his knees kept bending and bending. His knees were only a few centimeters from the ground at this point, but he still wasn't ready to give in. Oh, wasn't this lad supposed to be weak? Even Endrick cannot handle this. How is he able to resist with an F-grade bloodline? Master J.K. wondered. Although he was only using a small portion of his strength just like Gustav thought earlier, this amount of strength was powerful enough to bring any Zulu-ranked mixed blood to their knees. Gustav was unwilling to be humiliated once again. He had faced enough of that in the past, especially for things that made no sense like what was going on right now. No one in their normal senses would meddle with a family feud, but this man seemed to be hell-bent on humiliating Gustav here today. That look of unwillingness on your face makes me want to humiliate you even more. How dare you touch my student? Master J.K. increased the force and pushed down on Gustav's shoulder even more. Just when Gustav's knees were about to make contact with the floor, a loud feminine voice was heard. What do you think you're doing to my student, J.K.? Chapter 55. What are you doing to my student, J.K.? The feminine voice was laced with such sharpness that it caused the man to tremble slightly upon hearing it. This voice? No way, it can't be her? Master J.K.'s shoulders turned stiff as he slowly turned around to stare at the person that had just spoken. Immediately he saw her, his heart nearly jumped out of his chest. It was a young lady with gray long hair. She had a slim and beautiful figure with a height that was almost 57. She was clad in a green short tight-fitted gown with a brown coat draped around her shoulders. Young Miss Amy. The man looked very surprised to see her. Miss Amy strode towards them with light and graceful steps. In 2 seconds she was already standing before them. I said, what are you doing to my student? Miss Amy asked with a threatening tone. You are student? Master J.K. turned back to look at Gustav, who was staring at him with a fierce look. Miss Amy also followed his look and noticed Gustav's shoulder was out of place. It seemed quite curved at an angle that suggested that it was broken. Her eyes suddenly turned fierce. How dare you! Swing! Miss Amy suddenly swung out her left hand towards the face of Master J.K. Pa! The sound of collision was like a miniature thunderclap causing small vibrations in the air. 20 pieces of teeth flew out of Master J.K.'s mouth along with a trail of blood as he was sent flying several feet toward the side. He kept sliding for several more feet till his head slammed into the wall. Bang! Everyone within the vicinity had their mouths wide open except for those who already knew Miss Amy beforehand. Did she just blow an echo-ranked mixed blood from the MBO away with one slap? Everyone had thoughts similar to this in their minds. Endrick and his mother were particularly surprised the most as the looks on their faces suggested that. Who is this woman? Why did she say she's Gustav's teacher? Endrick was not familiar with Miss Amy since he was still in middle school, while their mother never attended the parent-teachers meeting whenever there was one in high school, so she never knew any one of Gustav's teachers. Both of them couldn't recognize her. Are you all right? Miss Amy turned to stare at Gustav while asking. Gustav nodded in affirmation. Although his shoulder was slightly injured from the intense grip, it had healed back due to his regeneration ability. J.K. Miss Amy called out again. J.K. was still lying on the floor while spitting out more pieces of his broken teeth and blood. When he heard Miss Amy call out to him again, he crawled towards her with a terror-stricken face. Why oh you M's I am so why? Master J.K. held Miss Amy's feet while begging. Everyone here couldn't understand the reason for such extreme behavior after the pride he had shown earlier. They had different theories popping into their heads upon seeing an officer from the MBO kneel to a citizen. It was an unbelievable sight, but they also knew that Miss Amy couldn't be an ordinary person for this kind of thing to be happening. Miss Amy glared at Master J.K. below with a dark look. Master J.K. shivered in his position as he saw her slightly crouch and stare into his eyes with more intensity. Tap! Tap! She slapped the back of his head lightly twice and spoke. Am not the one you should be apologizing to. Master J.K. heard that and turned to stare at Gustav before turning his head back to stare at Miss Amy again. He knew that if he complied with her demand it would result in humiliation for him, but if he didn't, only he knew the horrors that awaited. Is he going to do it? Everyone had a feeling that they were going to witness something they had never seen before in their lives. Master J.K. swallowed spit and let go of Miss Amy's feet before crawling towards Gustav. "I am so sorry," he said with a pleading look. Gustav could see the fear written all over Master J.K.'s face, which had him wondering, why would he fear Miss Amy so much? It was surprising to see this much fear on a person's face, but even with Gustav felt like laughing when he saw Master J.K.'s mouth missing nearly all of its teeth. "Well, since we've already gotten to this point." Gustav raised his foot and brought it down on Master J.K.'s face. Blam! Gasp! Everyone stared at the scene with a look of shock. They couldn't believe that Gustav would have the guts to do that. Gustav rubbed the sole of his shoes on Master J.K.'s face repeatedly before bringing it down. "Now we're even," Gustav said inwardly and proceeded to move forward. "I'm going, Miss Amy." Gustav waved his hand towards Miss Amy and walked towards the elevator. Everyone stared at Gustav with a look of amazement. At this moment he shined like a million stars in the galaxy, which attracted their eyes. Miss Amy nodded at him with a smirk on her face. "Good kid, you didn't wimp out on me," Miss Amy said, and proceeded to turn around. She only moved 2 steps forward before pausing and turning around to stare at Hendrik and his mother. "Thank you for letting go of such a wonderful son. I will make sure I take care of him, unlike you." She stated this and turned around to leave. Gustav's mother had a lifeless look on her face, mixed with confusion. She was unable to reply to that statement, since everything still looked like a dream to her. Hendrik's eyes were still widened as he couldn't believe what had happened. Either did he understand what came over Gustav, and where he got the boldness to go through with something as crazy as that. Master J.K. had a look of humiliation on his face as he remained in that position for many seconds. When Gustav stomped his face earlier, he didn't feel any pain since Gustav was too weak, but the humiliation he already felt was multiplied by 2. He had to watch someone weaker and lower than him in status stomp on his face without being able to fight back. He had never felt so humiliated before in his entire existence. Who knew that she would take in a disciple? "I need to stay away from here as from now on," Master J.K. said internally as he gnashed his gums together, causing him pains. He had forgotten that at the moment he almost didn't have teeth. Gustav arrived in front of his apartment building in a few minutes. He walked into the building feeling refreshed and vibrant, with his face glowing up. He thanked his stars that Miss Amy was there, if not it would have to face another round of humiliation. He would probably be able to take it normally, but when it was in front of the family he discarded, he wasn't willing to accept it. He walked through the corridor and arrived in front of his apartment. Instead of heading towards his apartment, Gustav turned and headed for Angie's apartment. "Calm! Calm!" He knocked twice. "Swai!" The door opened up and Angie's face appeared in his line of sight. "Hey Angie!" Gustav greeted with a smile on his face. "Hey Gustash!" Angie was about to reply when she noticed something. "He's smiling?" Her eyes slightly widened in bewilderment. So charming, seeing Gustav's lips curved at both edges looked so angelic to her that she didn't notice. They were still standing at the door. Is there something on my face?" Gustav asked after noticing Angie's stare. "Eh? So why, your face is good," Angie replied with a wry smile. Too good. Her cheeks slightly reddened. "I'm here to see your father, is he in?" Gustav said. My father?" "Yes, he's in," Angie said and walked into the apartment. "Come in, Gustav." A masculine voice sounded from within the apartment. Chapter 56. "I'm here to see your father, is he in?" Gustav said. My father?" "Yes, he's in," Angie said and walked into the apartment. "Come in, Gustav." A masculine voice sounded from within the apartment. Gustav followed Angie in after hearing that. Angie's father was seated on the blue sofa located on Gustav's right side. Gustav walked towards the one opposite his and sat. This was the first time Gustav was seeing Angie's father during the day. He had only seen him during night times since he always came late from work and Gustav hardly came out of his apartment. On closer look, Gustav noticed that Angie's father's skin was whitish than normal and lines were extending from the horn in the middle of his head towards his nose and down to his lips. I guess he's one of those pure-blood Slarkovs with more physical differences to that of humans, Gustav noted this. Yes, Gustav, to what do I owe this visit? Angie's father said with a solemn face. Angie stood at the dining area side to listen to their conversation. She was also wondering why Gustav will come to see her father. I've decided to accept the offer for that position, Gustav replied. Angie's father's eyes widened slightly in delight. You mean you will accept to do it? He asked. Gustav nodded in affirmation. Do what? What are Gustav and my father planning? Angie's mind was full of questions. Can we negotiate the price now, or we have to put some other procedures in place first? Gustav inquired. Let me inform the others first. Angie's father stood up and walked towards the passageway on the left. Angie stared at Gustav's face from the dining area with a suspicious look. Gustav just kept staring forward like he was thinking about something. There was no other expression on his face. I should mind my business so I don't end up like the last time, Angie said internally after remembering the stairs incident. She was still embarrassed about it till now. Angie kept staring at Gustav's face from the side. Her curiosity rose as the seconds passed, especially when her father still hadn't come back to the living room. After some more seconds passed, she walked towards Gustav. Gustav, what are you and my father planning? Angie asked while twirling her hair. Nothing special, Gustav replied with a dismissive look. Tell me, she demanded. Why are you interested? Gustav questioned while squinting his eyes. Well. Angie kept using her fingers to twirl her hair with a look of embarrassment. Gustav, we're heading to Darge Coffee Shop. Angie's father's voice came from the other end, cutting their conversation short. Gustav stood up and turned to head towards the door. Bye, Angie, Gustav said while heading towards the door. But... Angie stuttered as she spoke, trying to tell Gustav to wait, but Gustav didn't look back after getting to the door. He opened the door and walked out. Angie's father also followed behind him. Angie, tell your mother that I will be out for some time, Angie's father said as he walked out. Angie pouted her lips in dissatisfaction and sat on the sofa. What are they planning? Angie wondered. Inside a small coffee shop, a group of 6 could be seen seated around a table. Angie's father and Gustav were among the 6, while the rest happened to be men from the neighborhood. These men happened to live around the same neighborhood as Gustav and Angie's family. Their apartments were located close to the sparse forest area behind them. We saw what he did the other day, so we're very confident that he can play this role. It should be a simple task for him. The safety of the community is paramount. The men spoke with a look of agreement. From what I heard, you're a Zulu-ranked mixed blood. One of the men sitting opposite Gustav asked. Gustav nodded in response. Being a Zulu-ranked mixed blood at such a young age, truly magnificent, another man added. So we all agree on Gustav being the next observer, Angie's father said with a solemn look. The 4 men nodded in affirmation. That settles it then. Gustav is our community observer from henceforth, Angie's father said with a smile. Can we talk about the price now? Gustav inquired with an expressionless look. The men nodded in response, and another round of conversation began. Some hours later, Gustav had arrived back in his home. He sat on the bed while planning his next move. If this goes as planned, I should be able to gather enough EXP to start leveling up without having to wait for quests, Gustav muttered. Although they don't appear every time, I remember Angie saying they've been appearing every week for a while now, which means at least another will be appearing this week. Gustav had a look of contemplation on his face as he spoke. His mind traveled back to today's events. In the dojo, Miss Amy had given him some information on MBO and mixed breeds. He also happened to bump into his former family. While the best of today's event was getting a new job. The other day, when the neighborhood was attacked by the Bloodwolf, Angie told Gustav that they used to have a neighborhood observer that happened to be a Step 4 Zulu-ranked mixed blood. He was called Old Man Daki. His work was generally a simple one: to patrol the neighborhood till midnight for any source of disturbance that had to do with mixed breeds. Mixed breeds occasionally appeared within the neighborhood at night time, but he had managed to fend off and sometimes even kill a lot of them. He was able to protect the neighborhood from mixed breeds below the serial rank. There was hardly any case of mixed breeds above level 5 appearing in the neighborhood. Once a mixed breed that had surpassed level 5 appeared in the neighborhood, the MBO will immediately be alerted and swing into action with speed. Level 1-5 mixed breed could be handled by Old Man Daki since he was a Step 4 Zulu ranked mixed blood. Unfortunately, Old Man Daki passed away 3 weeks earlier at the age of 149. Chapter 57. Since then the neighborhood was exposed to danger. None of the mixed bloods in this neighborhood were Zulu ranked. There was only one person who was Zulu ranked, but that person wasn't a combat-type mixed blood. The neighborhood had occasional attacks of lower-leveled mixed breeds like once every month, but before Old Man Daki died the creatures started appearing every week. He was able to manage the situation before it went completely out of hand, but when he died it became a shitstorm for the neighborhood. There were about 57 buildings in that particular area where Old Man Daki protected. With Old Man Daki gone, a mixed breed managed to infiltrate a building and slaughtered an entire family. Angie was the only one that could stand up to the mixed breeds, but she could only drag out the fight till the cops arrived and killed it off with modern weapons. Now that Gustav had arrived in the neighborhood, and they saw how he was capable of killing a mixed breed, they decided to make him an observer. They thought he was a Step 4 Zulu rank like Old Man Daki. Gustav didn't bother explaining to them that he wasn't. He let them believe they were right. Of course, they knew Gustav still attended school, so patrolling all night would be impossible, but the job didn't require Gustav to patrol the neighborhood all night. He only had to do it till midnight. According to the 25-year history of this place, mixed breeds never appeared around midnight. The closest to midnight they had appeared was around 11 p.m. If Gustav patrolled till 12 and no irregularities were noticed, he would be done with the job for that night. Gustav and the men in the coffee shop had a lengthy conversation about this. These men were well-known figures in the community, so they were practically representing the neighborhood with their choices. Gustav charged them 30,000 a month. Old Man Daki used to collect 15,000 every month, but Gustav felt it was too low. Although his goal for doing this wasn't completely because of the money, he wouldn't do it for such a price, talk less of doing it for free. The men had no option but to accept Gustav's price since he wasn't backing down. Gustav walked out of his apartment towards the balcony area. He moved towards the edge where he could see the buildings and the surroundings. Some buildings were taller than this in the vicinity, but they were only a few. Most of the buildings around here were no more than 10 stories tall. He looked around, noting the structures and streets. From now on this neighborhood is under my protection, I guess, Gustav smirked while saying this internally. He started his new job this same night. Gustav used that night time to know the neighborhood better. He had every single building color, structure, location etched into his head. The alleyways, streets, intersections, etc. He had memorized every part of the neighborhood. He also patrolled deeper into the sparse forest area behind. He discovered that the forest of trees wasn't sparse the further he traveled. The deeper he traveled into the forest, the denser the forest of trees became. Gustav had discovered something yesterday, and he wanted to confirm it. When he got to a particular depth, he could see blue and green glowing lines forming a wall up ahead. The blue and green glowing lines were more than 1,000 meters from his position, yet he could see them. The wall they formed was more than 600 feet in height. He immediately figured that this was the border they were referring to. The second border, since according to his research there were 2 borders. One blocked the mixed breed within the city from entering into human territories, while the second, which was still up ahead, served as the division between Plankton City and Atrahia City. The distance between the 2 borders was said to be about 3,000 miles. This made Gustav wonder just how many mixed breeds were in between for there to be that much space. There was a long road towards his east that led to the outskirts of the city. The blue and green glowing lines barricaded the road on both sides, which proved that the road was safe to travel on since it cut through the middle of the forest ahead. This road was well constructed, and it also led to the city behind. If a person was to find themselves within the second border, they would be traversing through the territory of mixed breeds. Gustav didn't move close to the glowing lines to check them out because from his position he could sense immense danger coming from those lines. He decided to turn back after observing the border for a few more minutes. The rest of the night was uneventful, and by midnight he headed back to his apartment to have a good night's rest. 3 days later, nothing interesting had happened during the last 3 days. Gustav had been doing his job as expected, but nothing had happened recently. He still researched about the borders in his free time, and had learned more about them in these past 3 days. Gustav was now interested in traveling through the second border after everything he discovered. The only issue was he couldn't leave the city right now. He wasn't chance due to all his activities. The next morning Gustav was up again around 5 am as usual. Today was a Thursday, which made it another school day. Gustav wasted no time in getting ready for school, and in about 10 minutes he was done. When he came out of his apartment, Angie was at the door waiting for him. He wondered why she would decide to go to school this early just so she could follow him, but he couldn't find the answer. He just felt she was pretty weird. They headed for school together, and went their separate ways after taking a bus to the nearest stop to both their schools. Gustav headed for his favorite kitchen to go do his morning job. Today was a pretty boring day in school again. Gustav was starting to get bored with schoolwork. He couldn't wait for the MBO entrance test to take place, but that was still 3 months away. Miss Amy told him not to slack in channeling his bloodline because Zulu rank may be the threshold for taking part in the test, but that didn't mean only Zulu rank mixed bloods would be participating. When Gustav heard that, he suddenly felt a rush of excitement. He had been focusing more on the system than channeling his bloodline because he didn't want to become way stronger than the participants of the test. He didn't want to arouse intense suspicion, so he was channeling his bloodlines slowly, especially after he found out that with every increase in rank came about a substantial multiplication of strength. He wanted to get enlisted into the MBO camp before he would go full force on increasing his bloodline strength and coupling it with the system altogether. Now that Miss Amy had said this, he decided to reach the next rank before the entrance test took place. The serial rank. School ended today with exciting announcements. There will be a 3-day exchange event between high schools holding in Atrahia City High School 1 month from now. Echelon Academy has been invited to participate. Class 3 students will be attending this exchange event. The principal of the school sounded this announcement in the ears of the students within the school hall. Gustav, who was seated far behind, had a smile on his face as he heard the announcement. Just the chance I have been waiting for to cross the border. Chapter 58. There will be a 3-day exchange event between high schools holding in Atrahia City High School 1 month from now. Echelon Academy has been invited to participate. Class 3 students will be attending this exchange event. The principal of the school sounded this announcement in the ears of the students within the school hall. Gustav, who was seated far behind, had a smile on his face as he heard the announcement. Just the chance I have been waiting for to cross the border. After the announcements, students from Class 3 went home with faces full of excitement. Exchange events were always exciting. Traveling to another city and also getting to meet students from other schools. Another reason why it was exciting was that there were always duels between schools. Students in Class 3 were prepared to show their prowess over there, especially those who had already achieved the Zulu rank. These were the reasons why most of them were feeling excited, but Gustav's reason was different. He just wanted to cross the border for research purposes. He didn't even plan on getting involved in the events. He only tagged it as a sightseeing event. He wasn't interested in their duels. Gustav went to Miss Amy's office afterward and they traveled towards the dojo. Blam! 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 Inside the small dojo, sounds of collision could be heard. Gustav and Miss Amy were sparring once again. Blam! Blam! Gustav spun around and threw his left foot towards Miss Amy's face. Miss Amy reacted by slapping Gustav's left leg towards the side, causing his body to tilt in midair. "And now you're wide open again," Miss Amy voiced out. Gustav's chest was facing her at this moment, while in midair. Miss Amy threw out her palm towards Gustav's tummy area. Gustav, who was in midair, suddenly rotated his body anti-clockwise at a very fast speed, causing her palm to miss him by a centimeter. "Huh? This kid." Miss Amy was astonished as her hand only phased through the air after extending it forward. While still being in midair, Gustav reached out his palm to grab Miss Amy's outstretched arm. This kid's agility increases by the day. How is he improving so fast? Miss Amy wondered while staring at Gustav's hand headed for her arm. Grab. Gustav landed on his feet in a crouched format with his right hand stretched up. He smiled as he stood up properly. "Miss Amy, I finally touched." Gustav's eyes widened in surprise as he noticed something after staring at his hand. In his grip was a prosthetic arm, while he noticed that his wrist was gripped by Miss Amy. He thought he grabbed Miss Amy, but it was the other way around. "Miss Amy, no fair. You used more strength than you were supposed to," Gustav voiced out as Miss Amy let go of his arm. "Haha, what were you expecting? The world isn't fair, and you of all people should know that," Miss Amy stated with a burst of light laughter. "What a shameless way of justifying cheating," Gustav muttered. "Did you say something?" Miss Amy smirked at him as she asked. "Nope, I was just praising Miss Amy's exclusive methods," Gustav said with a smile. Gustav understood what she meant. On the battlefield, no one would reduce their strength to fight you just because you happened to be weaker. Gustav stared at the prosthetic arm he was holding with a look of astonishment. "It seems Miss Amy can use her bloodline to create anything instantly," Gustav said internally. He was very close to touching her arm earlier, yet she was able to create a prosthetic arm instantly. Her speed was enough to fool him, making him think he had grabbed her. The prosthetic arm was exactly like hers. Gustav had touched Miss Amy severally during their sparring sessions, so he could close his eyes and still be able to recognize her arm if he touched it, yet he didn't notice that he wasn't holding her arm till he saw it with his eyes. Troyan! The arm dispersed into light particles while Gustav was still holding onto it. Gustav realized that this was the first time Miss Amy was using her bloodline ability in a spar against him. He analyzed the difference between Miss Amy's bloodline and Yuhiko's bloodline and noted the difference. Both were creation bloodlines, but Miss Amy's was the type that could materialize things out of thin air. She only needed a thought to create something. As for Yuhiko, she could only transform one thing into another. Yuhiko's creation bloodline allowed her to turn matter into anything she willed, but she still had limits. Also, she wasn't able to transform an item in an instant. If she wanted to convert the air around her into something else, it would take more time. The bigger the object she had in hand, the faster and better she could convert the item. Miss Amy didn't have that limitation, but she also couldn't convert an item into something else. So their bloodlines were similar but also different. If any one of them could read Gustav's mind, they would find his analysis very scary because it was true. Gustav noted everything about their bloodline abilities down to the details in his mind. He had been analyzing Yuhiko's years back since she was his crush. As for Miss Amy, he only analyzed hers at this moment. Now he only needed to see a person use their bloodline ability once for him to be able to analyze it. "Gustav, what will you do in the exchange event?" Miss Amy leaned with her back against the wall as she inquired. "Nothing, I'm only coming along with them to sightsee," Gustav answered. "So, you won't be joining your classmates to form a team in the duel against schools?" Miss Amy inquired with a playful smile. "Miss Amy knows me well enough to understand that I prefer to be alone than to work with those spoiled brats," Gustav answered while seating on the floor. "Oh, wouldn't it be boring for you to just go there and do nothing?" Miss Amy asked with a smirk because she believed Gustav could not attend this event without getting into some kind of trouble. "I'd rather be bored than associate with stupidity," Gustav replied. "Oh, is that so?" Miss Amy still had that mischievous smile on her face as she questioned. Seeing the smile on her face, Gustav already knew that Miss Amy had something in mind. Miss Amy wasn't the smiling type, she only ever did this around Gustav. Yes, I'm 100% sure that I won't participate in this event in any way, Gustav answered. I doubt that, Miss Amy answered. Gustav stared at her with a look of seriousness. Since you like bets so much, let's make a bet, Miss Amy suggested. Gustav's face showed confusion as he exclaimed. Some hours later Gustav had arrived in front of his apartment building. His mind was on today's announcement in school. The exchange even was 1 month from now. The only problem Gustav had now was, how would he make it work since he already started this night job? Chapter 59. While walking towards his apartment, everyone around stared at him with a look of amazement. Welcome back, Gustav! Good afternoon, Gustav! How was school today? Different people greeted him from different angles. Some teenage girls around also greeted him with smiles. One of them was even winking at him. Gustav just nodded his head in response to their greetings and climbed the stairs to head towards his apartment. He got to the corridor and met Angie standing in front of his apartment door again. This time she was clothed in jeans shorts and a butter-colored sweater. Immediately she saw Gustav, she ran towards him. Gustav, why didn't you tell me that you were the new observer for our neighborhood? She questioned Gustav immediately she got to his front. Well, you didn't need to know that information, Gustav replied with a dismissive look and kept walking forward. He now understood the reason for the warm welcome in front of the building. Although he was always greeted warmly whenever he arrived, today's welcome was much warmer. It was obvious that the neighborhood was now aware of him being the new observer. Angie followed him from the side waiting for him to say more, but to her disappointment, those were the only words he muttered. It's dangerous, Angie stated while looking down. What if you get killed? She asked with a crestfallen look. Gustav didn't reply, he just kept walking until he got to the front of his apartment. Gustav, I want in. Let me join you, she said while grabbing Gustav's cloth from behind. Immediately Gustav heard that he knew what she was referring to. No, Gustav replied while opening the door and walking in. But I can assist you. What if you get in trouble? I swear I don't plan on taking any cuts from your pay. Angie spoke with a look of worry. The answer is no, Gustav said with a fierce look, and was about to close the door when Angie said something. I'm now a Zulu ranked mixed blood. Gustav held the side of the door and stared at her for a few seconds before replying. Congratulations, bye-bye. Slam. Gustav slammed the door after congratulating her. Angie pouted her lips after the door was slammed in her face for the second time. So mean. She hugged her chest after muttering those words. Inside his apartment, Gustav had a frown on his face. She's definitely going to come and bother me again, he muttered with a sigh. Gustav understood Angie's character, and he knew she wouldn't want to back down, but he also couldn't back down on this since he had to keep his abilities a secret. Angie was overcaring and it made Gustav get pissed off sometimes, but other times he saw her as an untainted soul. He didn't want to be disturbed by her persistence again, so he thought of a way to avoid her. No matter how nice Angie was, he would never risk letting her find out about his multiple bloodlines and abilities. Gustav walked towards his room and sat on his bed. No need to hold back with my bloodline. I cannot risk failing the entrance tests, Gustav said internally and proceeded to cross his legs. He closed his eyes and steadied his breathing. His concentration peaked as he sensed where his bloodline channel points were located in his body. This was when Gustav also noticed the other two bloodlines within his body. Atomic Manipulation and Beast Transformation Bloodline. Gustav noticed that the channel points of these two bloodlines within his body were already channeled through the third point like his original bloodline earlier. The difference was, the channel points of both bloodlines weren't as large as his original bloodline. Gustav already understood that he would also have to channel the other two bloodlines to the fourth point to get them to the Zulu rank. This had him wondering, if all the bloodlines got to the Zulu rank, what changes would it bring? Gustav originally wanted to focus on his original bloodline so he would become a second step Zulu rank soon, but at this moment, he changed his mind. He could tell that becoming a 3-time Zulu rank would bring some good benefits. So right now, Gustav decided to focus on channeling beast transformation to the 4th point. 3 hours later it was already 7 p.m. It was time for Gustav to begin his night job. He had managed to channel beast transformation bloodline further. Even though he didn't get it to the 4th point yet, he was still alright with the progress. Gustav stood up from his bed and pulled off his school uniform. There was a mirror positioned on the left side of the wall. Gustav walked over to it and stood in front of it. He was surprised to see just how much he had transformed in 3 months. He was 54 in height right now. His face had become so smooth and his eyes were dim, but fierce, giving him a very charming and vibrant look. His pupils had a shade of gold mixed with brown. His chin was long and slanted on both sides, looking like a V. Whenever Gustav went out, people always mistook him for the son of a billionaire due to his unique looks and fierce expression. None of them knew he was very far from being a billionaire's son. Gustav walked towards his wardrobe and picked up black jeans pants and a black sweatshirt. His former closet used to be empty, but this one was full of clothes. In no time Gustav had worn his clothes and was ready to leave. His reason for being on all black was to blend into the environment. Although the streets were always brightly lit even during the nights, the same couldn't be said for the forest area behind the neighborhood. Gustav moved towards the right side of the room and tapped the surface of the wall thrice. Tap. 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 A small part of the wall slid upwards, revealing the view of the streets and the structures on this side of the building. This opening was actually a window that had been there since Gustav rented the place, but he only found out about it 2 days ago. The window was as wide as a door, placed in a landscape format. Gustav placed his right hand on the edge of the window and looked downwards. Luckily, this part of the street was not usually populated. He could hardly see people moving around down there. Gustav leaned his body weight on his hand and lifted his body to perch on the window. Whoa! The winds blew into his face and caused the strands of hair in front of his head to jump around. A normal person would be scared seeing the distance from here to the ground, but Gustav was no longer a normal person. Sway! Gustav jumped forward and his body started descending with speed towards the ground. Vwum! Blam! In a few seconds he landed on the ground, causing a small thudding sound to ring out. Unlike before when he jumped off this building and made a loud sound, this time there was hardly any sound. Dash has been activated. Gustav activated dash and speed off towards the sparse forest behind the neighborhood. Swoosh! He had breezed through the street in a few seconds, causing mild winds to scatter across the place. Just as Gustav had predicted, a certain teenage girl was waiting outside his apartment. She stood in front of his door and repeatedly checked the watch in her hand. Why is he taking so long? Chapter 60. Gustav arrived in the sparse forest region in a few seconds. He stopped running after using dash twice. He stood in front of a 312 meters tall tree. He crouched his knees a little and pushed himself upwards with force. Tum! He leaped 5 meters above the ground and grabbed onto the tree when he got to that height. His fingers sunk a few inches deep into the bark of the tree as he began climbing up. After avoiding the branches and leaves, Gustav arrived at the top of the tree. He stood on one of the branches and stared at the vast land around him. His perception had increased to the extent that he could sense movements from 40 meters away. His perception was able to cover around 40 to 45 meters radius. It was so sharp that even the movement of an ant couldn't escape his senses if he concentrated to the max. This was Gustav's routine for the past 3 days. He moved from place to place and climbed up the trees while spreading out his perception. He would also go back to the neighborhood areas to observe a particular area for the night before heading towards the sparse forest area again. His energy had increased now compared to before, so he could use dash repeatedly and still save up a lot of energy. After checking around for some time and not noticing anything, Gustav jumped down from the tree. Blam! Immediately he landed, he activated dash again and moved to another part of the sparse forest. In an underground facility, laboratory pieces of equipment could be seen all over the place. Androids moved about the place, transporting pieces of equipment from one place to the other. People in white garments could be seen all over the place. A strong stench of chemicals permeated the environment. A man in a blue office suit stood in front of a glass wall. He had dark brown hair that was smoothly packed towards the back. His expression was stiff and cold. Unlike Miss Amy, who had a nonchalant expression, and Gustav, who was cultivating something similar, this man was more of the uncaring type. The look in his eyes was so cold and uncaring. He looked like the kind of person that wouldn't flinch even if the entire world was burning. The transparent glass wall in front barricaded an experimentation testing room that was similar to the size of a basketball court. Inside the glass wall, an experiment was about to begin. A large greenish-looking rock was placed inside the room within the glass wall. This rock was about the size of a normal door but wider than 3 meters. A large muzzle similar to the looks of an armored tank barrel was pointed at it. Unlike the normal tanks used in the military of the old ages, this tank's body parts were like human legs. It was like joining a large gun to the lower part of a human body, but it was obvious that this wasn't a human body. Although it looked like it, this was a mechanical AI tank. It could move across the battlefield with 16 times the speed of a normal tank, and it carried firepower that was more than 100 times greater than a military olden days tank. It was violet with a shade of blue. Right now it was pointed at the rock in front, ready to blast it apart. Blue, red and purple rays of light could be seen gathering at the muzzle from every direction. "Sir Young, we've loaded it with the 5 different mixtures of energy crystals. It should be able to cause at least 1,000% more damage than it used to." A man wearing a green spectacle without any temples spoke from the side. Good, let's get it over with," Young answered with a solemn voice. "But Sir Young, with this amount of energy packed together in one, we're walking through uncharted territories. We don't know if the MN glass walls will be able to contain the force and residual impacts of the blast," the scientist said with a tone of urgency. The other scientists in the vicinity had looks that suggested that they agreed to the man's statement, but they didn't have the guts to voice out their thoughts unlike him. "It's impossible for me to do this on the surface without arousing suspicion. The MBO will probably send someone to investigate, and I don't need those clowns sticking their nose into my business. It can only be done here." As Young came to this conclusion in his mind, he spoke. "The energy compressor has been amplified?" he asked. "Yes," the scientist answered. "The nanites' reorganization have been upgraded to the latest version?" Young asked again. "Yes, Sir Young, but—" Before the scientist could complete his statement, Young interrupted him. "Carry on with the experiment." The tone of his voice left no room for negotiation or argument. The scientist nodded with a defeated look and turned to face the glass wall. "Fire the L-mecha cannon after the countdown from 5. He shouted out. The other scientists within the room had expressions of discomfort when they heard that, even though they were trying to hide it. 5. The scientist started counting down. 4. 3. As he was counting down, the purplish, red, and blue rays converging around the muzzle of the cannon increased exponentially, gathering an immense amount of energy to its tip. 2. 1. Fire! Immediately after the scientist counted down completely, the rays of energy that had accumulated on the muzzle finally shot out. Zwinnet traveled in a straight line towards the green rock and arrived before it in an instant. The circular multicolored energy that shot out made contact with the rock, and something marvelous happened. The circular energy blast that was contained to the size of a football earlier started expanded upon making contact. Zwinnet! The scientist's eyes widened as the energy kept expanding till it covered half of the entire space within the glass walls before. Boom! It exploded with unfathomable force, carrying a destructive wave of energy that spread across the surroundings. The entire vicinity was blasted into smithereens, including the glass walls. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.